A millionaire takes on the role of a gardener to test the character of his future in-laws. Met with hostility and challenges, he discovers a house filled with secrets and tensions. The heiress, unaware of his true identity, begins to form unexpected bonds with him. The millionaire was horrified by what he witnessed in that house. The sprawling skyline of New York City stretched out before Alexander Thornton as he gazed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. At 42, he was at the pinnacle of success, CEO of Thornton Enterprises, one of the largest technology conglomerates in the country. His net worth was measured in billions, his influence felt in boardrooms and political circles alike. Yet, as he stood there impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, Alexander felt utterly alone. He turned away from the view, his eyes falling on the latest copy of Forbes magazine lying on his desk. His own face stared back at him from the cover, alongside the headline, "Alexander Thornton, the enigmatic titan of tech." He picked it up, flipping through the pages until he found the featured article about himself. Words like brilliant, innovative, and ruthless jumped out at him, but one sentence in particular caught his attention. Despite his professional success, Thornton remains notoriously private about his personal life, with no known romantic relationships. Alexander tossed the magazine back onto his desk with a sigh. The article wasn't wrong. His last relationship had ended over 2 years ago, a brief and ultimately unfulfilling affair with a fellow CEO who seemed more interested in merging their companies than their lives. Before that, there had been a string of dates with socialites and models, all of which left him feeling emptier than before. "Is this all there is?" he muttered to himself, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. A soft knock on the door interrupted his brooding. "Come in," he called out, straightening his posture and schooling his features into the mask of confidence he wore so well. His assistant, Margaret, entered the room, her efficiency evident in every movement. "Mr. Thornton, your 2 o'clock appointment is here. The board members for the new tech startup acquisition." Alexander nodded, his mind already shifting gears. "Thank you, Margaret. I'll be right there." As Margaret turned to leave, Alexander found himself asking, "Margaret, may I ask you something personal?" She paused, surprise flickering across her face. In the 5 years she had worked for him, Alexander had never inquired about her personal life. "Of course, sir. You're married, aren't you? Happily, I assume." A warm smile spread across Margaret's face. "Yes, sir. 23 years next month." "How did you know?" Alexander asked, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "How did you know he was the one?" Margaret's expression softened. "It wasn't any one big thing, Mr. Thornton. It was all the little things. The way he'd remember my favorite flower, or how he'd leave silly notes in my lunchbox. But mostly, it was how I felt truly seen when I was with him. Not for what I could do or what I represented, but for who I was." Alexander absorbed her words, a strange ache forming in his chest. "Thank you, Margaret. That will be all." As the door closed behind her, Alexander turned back to the window, Margaret's words echoing in his mind. To be seen for who he truly was, it seemed like an impossible dream. Everyone in his world saw him as Alexander Thornton, the billionaire CEO. Even those who claimed to know him personally were always acutely aware of his wealth and status. How could he ever know if someone cared for him? Alexander the man rather than Thornton the magnate. An idea began to form in his mind, wild and impractical, yet oddly appealing. What if he could step out of his life, shed the trappings of wealth and power, and experience the world as an ordinary man? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Before he could explore the idea further, his phone buzzed with a reminder of his impending meeting. Alexander pushed the thought aside, slipping back into his role as the formidable CEO. But as he strode out of his office to meet with the board members, a small part of him clung to that seed of an idea, nurturing it in the back of his mind. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and strategic planning. Alexander played his part flawlessly, the consummate businessman navigating the cutthroat world of corporate America. Yet, beneath it all, that tiny seed of an idea continued to grow. As night fell and the city lights twinkled below, Alexander found himself once again alone in his office. He loosened his tie, feeling the weight of his loneliness more acutely than ever. On an impulse, he opened his laptop and began to research. Hours ticked by, as Alexander delved into a world so different from his own. Job listings for gardeners, landscapers, and groundskeepers. He read about the skills required, the average salaries, the day-to-day responsibilities. It was a far cry from the world of mergers and acquisitions, but Alexander found himself oddly fascinated. As dawn broke over the city, Alexander sat back in his chair, his mind made up. He would do it. He would step away from his life, adopt a new identity, and seek out a genuine connection. But where to start? His eyes fell on a job listing that had caught his attention earlier. Experienced gardener needed for estate maintenance. The posting was for a position at the Hawthorne estate in the Hamptons, owned by the prominent Hawthorne family. Alexander had crossed paths with Jonathan Hawthorne, the family patriarch, at various charity events over the years. He recalled that Hawthorne had a daughter around Alexander's age, though they had never been formally introduced. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, Alexander began to formulate his plan. He would apply for the position, using a false identity and background. It would be a challenge, but Alexander had never been one to shy away from those. This would be his chance to experience life from a completely different perspective, to form connections based on who he was, rather than what he owned. As he began to draft his application, Alexander felt a surge of energy he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive. Whatever came next, he knew his life was about to change dramatically. Little did he know just how profound that change would be, or the challenges and heartache that lay ahead on his journey to find true love and acceptance. The warm June sun beat down on Alexander as he stood at the imposing wrought-iron gates of the Hawthorne estate. Gone was the tailored suit, replaced by well-worn jeans and a simple blue work shirt. His normally clean-shaven face now sported a week's worth of stubble, and his carefully styled hair was hidden beneath a worn baseball cap. In his calloused hands, the result of weeks of intensive preparation, he clutched a battered leather satchel containing his credentials and a few personal items. As he pressed the intercom button, Alexander took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. This was it, the moment his plan would be put to the test. Would his deception hold up under scrutiny? Yes? A clipped, impatient voice crackled through the speaker. "Good morning," Alexander replied, adopting the slight southern drawl he'd been practicing. "My name's Alex Thompson. I'm here about the gardening position." There was a pause, then a buzz as the gates slowly swung open. "Come to the main house," the voice instructed curtly. Alexander, now Alex, walked up the long, winding driveway, taking in the meticulously landscaped grounds. His trained eye could spot the areas that needed attention, overgrown hedges here, wilting flowers there. Despite his nervousness, he felt a spark of excitement at the prospect of working with his hands, of nurturing life from the earth. As he approached the mansion, Alex's steps faltered. The house was even more impressive up close, a sprawling three-story edifice of gleaming white stone and expansive windows. It was a stark reminder of the world he was leaving behind, and for a moment doubt crept in. Was he really prepared to live this lie? Before he could reconsider, the massive front door swung open. A stern-faced woman in her early 60s emerged, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her crisp linen suit a testament to wealth and taste. "Mr. Thompson, I presume," she said, her tone making it clear that his presence was barely tolerated. "Yes, ma'am," Alex replied, doffing his cap politely. "Pleased to meet you." "I am Mrs. Hawthorne," she said, looking him up and down with barely concealed disdain. "You're here about the gardening position. Follow me." Without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel and strode back into the house. Alex hurried after her, trying not to gawk at the opulent interior. Crystal chandeliers, priceless artwork, and antique furniture filled every room they passed through. It was a level of luxury Alex was accustomed to, but seeing it through the eyes of his new persona was a jarring experience. Mrs. Hawthorne led him to a sun-drenched conservatory at the back of the house. A man in his mid-60s sat at a desk, poring over some papers. He looked up as they entered, his shrewd eyes assessing Alex in an instant. "Jonathan, this is the applicant for the gardening position," Mrs. Hawthorne said, her tone suggesting she'd rather be introducing a stray dog. Jonathan Hawthorne stood extending his hand. "Alex Thompson, was it? I'm Jonathan Hawthorne. Your references were adequate. Tell me, what experience do you have with estate management? Alex launched into the carefully crafted backstory he'd prepared. He spoke of years working on large estates in Georgia and the Carolinas, dropping in details about specific plants and techniques he'd researched extensively. As he talked, he could see a glimmer of approval in Jonathan's eyes, while Mrs. Hawthorne's frown only deepened. "Well, you certainly seem knowledgeable," Jonathan said when Alex finished. "But knowledge isn't everything. Are you prepared for the level of commitment this job requires? We expect nothing less than perfection here at Hawthorne Estate." "Yes, sir," Alex replied earnestly. "I'm ready to put in whatever work is necessary to meet your standards." Jonathan nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Very well. You'll start immediately. Mrs. Collins, our housekeeper, will show you to your quarters and give you a tour of the grounds." As if on cue, a kind-faced woman in her 50s appeared at the conservatory door. "This way, Mr. Thompson," she said with a warm smile. As Alex turned to follow her, Mrs. Hawthorne's voice stopped him cold. "One more thing, Mr. Thompson. We expect our staff to know their place. You're here to tend the gardens, nothing more. Is that clear?" Alex felt a flash of indignation at her tone, but quickly suppressed it. "Crystal clear, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat once more before following Mrs. Collins out. As they walked through the expansive grounds, Mrs. Collins filled Alex in on the estate's history and the family's expectations. Alex listened attentively, but his mind was racing. The Hawthornes were every bit as demanding and status-obsessed as he'd anticipated. This charade would be more challenging than he'd imagined. "And here we are," Mrs. Collins said, stopping at a small but well-maintained cottage at the edge of the property. "This will be your home for the duration of your employment. It's not much, but it's comfortable." Alex stepped inside, taking in the modest furnishings and simple decor. It was a far cry from his luxurious penthouse, but there was a homey charm to the place that he found appealing. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins," he said sincerely. "This is perfect," she beamed at him. "I'm glad you like it. Now get yourself settled in. You'll start bright and early tomorrow morning." As Mrs. Collins left, Alex sank onto the small sofa, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. He was really doing this, living a double life, deceiving everyone around him. But as he looked out the window at the vast gardens waiting for his care, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. A movement caught his eye, and he saw a young woman walking among the rose bushes. Even from a distance, he could see she was beautiful, with long chestnut hair and a grace in her movements that spoke of both confidence and gentleness. She knelt to examine a bloom, and Alex found himself holding his breath. Could this be the Hawthorne daughter? The thought sent a thrill through him. This was why he was here, after all, to find a genuine connection, to be loved for who he was, not what he owned. As the woman stood and walked out of sight, Alex felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Tomorrow, he would begin his new life as Alex Thompson, gardener. It would be challenging, humbling, and possibly heartbreaking. But as he unpacked his meager belongings, he knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same again. Little did Alex know that the seeds of love, deception, and self-discovery he was planting would grow into a garden more wild and beautiful than he could have ever imagined. The shrill cry of an alarm clock pierced the pre-dawn silence, startling Alex from his restless sleep. For a moment, he lay disoriented in the unfamiliar bed, the events of the previous day rushing back to him. He wasn't in his plush penthouse anymore. He was Alex Thompson, the new gardener at Hawthorne Estate. With a groan, he dragged himself out of bed, his muscles protesting from the unaccustomed softness of the mattress. As he splashed cold water on his face, Alex caught sight of his reflection in the small bathroom mirror. The face staring back at him was a far cry from the polished CEO he'd been just days ago. Stubble shadowed his jaw, and there were dark circles under his eyes from a night of tossing and turning. "You wanted this?" he reminded himself sternly. "Time to prove you're more than just a suit and a bank account." Dressed in work boots, jeans, and a faded t-shirt, Alex made his way to the garden shed where Mrs. Collins had told him he'd find his tools and instructions. The air was crisp and cool, heavy with dew, and Alex found himself appreciating the quiet beauty of the early morning in a way he never had before. At the shed, he found a note pinned to the door. "Mr. Thompson, your first task is to prune the rose garden and prepare the soil for new plantings. Tools are inside. Mrs. Hawthorne expects the job completed by noon. Mrs. Collins. Alex's brow furrowed as he read the note. Pruning an entire rose garden in just a few hours? It seemed like an impossible task. But he was determined to prove himself, to show that he was capable of hard work and dedication. For the next several hours, Alex threw himself into the task with a vigor that surprised even him. He carefully pruned each rose bush, remembering the techniques he'd studied so diligently. His hands, soft from years of office work, soon became scratched and sore from the thorns, but he pressed on, determined not to let a few cuts slow him down. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Alex became aware of eyes on him. He looked up to see Mrs. Hawthorne watching from a second-story window, her expression unreadable. Beside her stood a younger woman, the same one Alex had glimpsed the day before. Even from a distance, her beauty took his breath away. Suddenly self-conscious, Alex straightened up, wiping the sweat from his brow. He offered a friendly wave, but Mrs. Hawthorne merely turned away, disappearing into the house. The younger woman, however, lingered for a moment longer, her gaze locked on Alex. Then, to his surprise, she smiled, a warm, genuine smile that sent his heart racing, before following her mother inside. Buoyed by that small gesture of kindness, Alex redoubled his efforts. He was so engrossed in his work that he didn't notice the approach of footsteps until a shadow fell across the rosebush he was tending. "Are you Mr. Spot?" Alex looked up, squinting against the sun, to find the young woman standing over him. Up close, she was even more stunning. Warm brown eyes, a smattering of freckles across her nose, and lips curved in a slight smirk. "I'm sorry?" Alex said, scrambling to his feet and brushing dirt from his hands. She pointed to a section of the bush he'd just finished pruning. "There. You left a dead branch." Alex peered at the bush, chagrined to realize she was right. "Good eye," he admitted. "I'll take care of it right away." "Thank you, Miss Hawthorne," she supplied. "But please, call me Olivia. And you're Alex, right? The new gardener?" "That's right," Alex nodded, trying to ignore the way his pulse quickened at her smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Olivia." "So, Alex," Olivia said, her eyes twinkling with curiosity, "what brings you to Hawthorne Estate? You don't seem like the typical gardener my parents usually hire." Alex tensed, worried his cover might already be blown. "Oh, what makes you say that?" Olivia shrugged, her gaze appraising. "Just a feeling. There's something different about you. More, I don't know, worldly, I guess." Thinking quickly, Alex gave a self-deprecating chuckle. "Well, I've certainly seen my fair share of the world, worked on estates all over the South, but at the end of the day, I'm just a simple guy who loves working with plants." "Is that so?" Olivia mused, seeming unconvinced but not unfriendly. "Well, I look forward to getting to know you better, Alex. Maybe you can tell me about some of those estates you've worked on." Before Alex could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Olivia, what are you doing?" Mrs. Hawthorne strode across the lawn, her heels sinking slightly into the soft grass. Her eyes darted between her daughter and Alex, narrowing with suspicion. "Just chatting with our new gardener, Mother," Olivia said, her voice taking on a cool edge that hadn't been there moments before. "I'm sure Mr. Thompson has better things to do than chat," Mrs. Hawthorne said dismissively. "Don't you have work to finish?" This last part was directed at Alex, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Yes, ma'am," Alex said, ducking his head respectfully. "I'll get right back to it." Mrs. Hawthorne nodded curtly, then turned to her daughter. "Come along, Olivia. We have the charity luncheon to prepare for." As they walked away, Alex couldn't help but overhear their whispered conversation. "Really, Olivia," Mrs. Hawthorne was saying, "I don't know what's gotten into you lately. First, you refused to entertain Robert Wainwright's perfectly reasonable proposal, and now I find you fraternizing with the help." "Mother, please," Olivia sighed, her voice tinged with exasperation. "Robert is a pompous bore, and I was merely being polite to our new employee. Is that such a crime?" Their voices faded as they entered the house, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts. So Olivia was being pressured into a relationship with someone else. The thought sent an unexpected pang through his chest. He shook his head, trying to clear it. He was here to find genuine connection, not to get caught up in family drama. As the day wore on, Alex continued his work, pushing his body to its limits. By the time the sun began to set, he had not only finished pruning the rose garden, but had also prepared the soil for new plantings, just as the note had instructed. Exhausted but oddly satisfied, Alex made his way back to his cottage. As he passed the main house, he caught sight of Olivia through a window. She was dressed elegantly, clearly ready for some social event, but her expression was one of barely concealed boredom as she listened to a man in an expensive suit. Robert Wainwright, Alex presumed. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Olivia's face lit up with a small, secret smile. She gave him a tiny wave, which Alex returned, feeling a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with his day of hard labor. As he collapsed onto his bed that night, muscles aching and hands stinging from a day of unaccustomed work, Alex found himself smiling. It had been a challenging day, full of backbreaking labor and navigating complex social dynamics. But for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. Little did he know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test him in ways he never imagined, forcing him to confront not just the Hawthorne's prejudices, but his own as well. As he drifted off to sleep, Alex's dreams were filled with warm brown eyes and the sweet scent of roses. As the days turned into weeks, Alex settled into a rhythm at Hawthorne Estate. Each morning he rose before dawn, his body gradually adjusting to the physical demands of his new life. The blisters on his hands hardened into calluses, and muscles he didn't even know he had grew stronger. Despite the grueling work, Alex found himself enjoying the tangible results of his labor. The meticulously manicured lawns, the vibrant flower beds, the perfectly trimmed hedges. However, not everything was coming up roses. Mrs. Hawthorne seemed determined to make Alex's life as difficult as possible. She would often change his tasks at the last minute, criticize his work for the smallest imperfections, and pile on extra duties with impossible deadlines. One particularly sweltering afternoon, Alex was on his hands and knees, painstakingly weeding an expansive flower bed, when Mrs. Hawthorne's sharp voice cut through the air. "Mr. Thompson, I thought I made it clear that the topiary needed to be shaped today." Alex looked up, squinting against the sun. "Yes, ma'am. I was planning to do that after I finished with the weeding, as per the schedule Mrs. Collins gave me." Mrs. Hawthorne's lips thinned into a disapproving line. "Plans change, Mr. Thompson. The Wainwrights are coming for dinner tonight, and I won't have them seeing unkempt shrubbery. The weeding can wait." As she turned to leave, she paused, her eyes falling on a small patch of dandelions near the edge of the lawn. "And do take care of those unsightly weeds. Really, Mr. Thompson, I'm beginning to wonder if you're truly as experienced as your references claimed." Alex bit back a retort, reminding himself of his purpose here. "Right away, Mrs. Hawthorne. I'll have it all done before the guests arrive." As Mrs. Hawthorne walked away, Alex heard a soft chuckle behind him. He turned to see Olivia leaning against a nearby tree, an amused smile playing on her lips. "You know," she said, approaching him, "I'm impressed by your patience. Most of our gardeners would have quit by now, given how Mother treats them." Alex shrugged, trying to ignore the way his heart raced at her presence. "It's all part of the job. Besides, I've dealt with far worse in my time." Olivia raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "Oh? Do tell." For a moment, Alex panicked, worried he might have said too much, but then he remembered his carefully crafted backstory and relaxed. "Well, there was this one time in South Carolina. The lady of the house was convinced that her prize-winning orchids needed to be watered with champagne. Nearly drove me to drink myself." Olivia laughed, a melodious sound that sent warmth spreading through Alex's chest. "Well, I can assure you that Mother hasn't resorted to wasting good champagne on plants. Yet." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. Then, remembering himself, Alex cleared his throat and gestured to his tools. "I should probably get back to work. Those topiaries won't shape themselves." Olivia nodded, a flicker of disappointment crossing her face. "Of course. Don't let me keep you." She turned to leave, but then paused, looking back at him. "Oh, and Alex? Don't let Mother get to you. Your work is beautiful." As she walked away, Alex found himself staring after her, a mix of emotions swirling in his chest. He was here to find genuine connection, yes, but he hadn't anticipated the complications of developing feelings for someone so far removed from his real world. Shaking off his reverie, Alex threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. He shaped the topiaries with meticulous care, turning the shrubs into elegant animal shapes, that would have impressed even the most discerning eye. As the sun began to set, he finally stepped back to admire his handiwork, his shirt soaked with sweat and his muscles aching. Just then, a sleek sports car pulled up the driveway, its engine purring. A tall, handsome man in his early 30s stepped out, adjusting his designer suit. This must be Robert Wainwright, Alex realized, feeling an unexpected pang of jealousy. Robert's eyes swept over the grounds, barely registering Alex's presence, but then his gaze fell on the freshly shaped topiaries, and a frown creased his brow. "You there, gardener?" he called out imperiously. "What have you done to these shrubs?" Alex straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I shaped them as Mrs. Hawthorne requested, sir. Is there a problem?" Robert approached, his nose wrinkling slightly, as if offended by Alex's sweaty appearance. "These shapes are all wrong. The Hawthorns always have their topiaries in geometric shapes, not whatever these are supposed to be." Before Alex could respond, Olivia's voice rang out from the front steps. "Actually, Robert, I asked for the change. I thought it might be nice to try something different for a change." Robert's demeanor instantly changed, a charming smile replacing his frown as he turned to Olivia. "Olivia, darling, you look absolutely stunning." As Robert made his way to Olivia, showering her with compliments, Alex couldn't help but notice the stiffness in Olivia's smile, the way she subtly leaned away from Robert's attempt to kiss her cheek. "Alex," Olivia called out, her eyes meeting his over Robert's shoulder. "Thank you for your hard work today. The topiaries look wonderful." Alex nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thank you, Miss Hawthorne. Enjoy your evening." As the couple disappeared into the house, Alex gathered his tools, his mind churning. The obvious tension between Olivia and Robert, the way Mrs. Hawthorne seemed intent on making his job difficult, the growing connection he felt with Olivia. It all added up to a situation far more complex than he had anticipated. Later that night, as Alex lay in his bed, he could hear the faint sounds of laughter and music drifting from the main house. He thought of Olivia, imagining her navigating the social niceties with Robert and their families, and felt a twinge of longing. For the first time since embarking on this adventure, Alex found himself questioning his decision. He had come here to find genuine connection, to be loved for who he was rather than what he owned. But as he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't help but wonder. In creating this new identity, had he merely traded one mask for another? Little did Alex know that the events set in motion that evening would soon force him to confront not just his growing feelings for Olivia, but the very foundations of the deception he had built his new life upon. As the cricket's song filled the night air, the seeds of both love and conflict continued to grow, promising a harvest that would change everything at Hawthorne Estate. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity to Hawthorne Estate. Preparations were underway for the annual Midsummer Gala, a charity event that brought together the crème de la crème of Hampton society. For Alex, this meant even longer hours and more demanding tasks, as Mrs. Hawthorne insisted on having the grounds in immaculate condition. One particularly humid morning, Alex was busy planting a new row of hydrangeas when he noticed Olivia approaching, a troubled expression on her face. She was clutching a leather-bound book to her chest, her knuckles white with tension. "Good morning, Miss Hawthorne," Alex called out, straightening up and wiping the sweat from his brow. "Is everything all right?" Olivia glanced around nervously before stepping closer. "Alex, I need your help with something, but you have to promise to keep it a secret." Intrigued and a little concerned, Alex nodded. "Of course." "What's going on?" Olivia hesitated for a moment, then thrust the book into his hands. "I found this in my father's study. It's a journal that belonged to my great-grandfather. I think there might be something valuable buried on the grounds." Alex's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Buried treasure, are you sure?" "Not exactly treasure," Olivia explained, lowering her voice. "But look at this entry." She flipped open the journal to a marked page. Alex read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "July 15th, 1923. The shipment arrived today. I've hidden it beneath the old oak, where it will remain safe until the storm passes. God willing, it will secure our family's future." He looked up at Olivia, realization dawning. "The old oak. You don't think it's referring to—" "The ancient oak tree near the lake," Olivia finished. "Yes, that's exactly what I think. Alex, I need your help to dig it up. Whatever it is, I have a feeling it's important." Alex hesitated, his mind racing. This was far beyond his duties as a gardener, and if Mrs. Hawthorne found out, he'd surely lose his job. But the pleading look in Olivia's eyes made his decision for him. "All right," he agreed, "but we'll have to do it at night when everyone's asleep." Olivia's face lit up with relief and excitement. "Thank you, Alex. I knew I could count on you." As she turned to leave, Alex called after her. "Olivia, wait, why me? Why not ask Robert or one of your friends for help?" Olivia paused, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Because I trust you, Alex. There's something about you. I feel like I can be myself around you." With that, she hurried back to the house, leaving Alex with a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. That night, under the cover of darkness, Alex and Olivia made their way to the old oak tree. Armed with shovels and flashlights, they began to dig, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and their own labored breathing. After what felt like hours, Alex's shovel hit something solid. "I think I found something," he whispered excitedly. Together, they carefully unearthed a small metal box. With trembling hands, Olivia opened it, gasping at its contents. Inside were stacks of letters, old photographs, and a small velvet pouch. As Olivia began to read one of the letters, her face paled in the dim light of the flashlight. "Alex," she said, her voice shaking, "these are love letters between my great-grandfather and a man named Thomas." Alex's eyes widened in surprise. "But I thought your great-grandfather was married to your great-grandmother." "He was," Olivia nodded, her eyes scanning the letter. "But according to this, he was in love with Thomas. They had to keep their relationship a secret because of the times they lived in." As they pored over the contents of the box, a picture emerged of a love that had been forced into hiding, of sacrifices made and hearts broken in the name of social expectations. The shipment mentioned in the journal, Olivia realized. It must have been these letters and mementos. He hid them here to keep them safe. Alex watched as Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Olivia looked up at him, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "I'm just overwhelmed. All this time there was this huge secret in my family's history. It makes me wonder what other truths have been buried." As they sat there, hands entwined, surrounded by the echoes of a long-hidden love, Alex felt a surge of guilt. Here was Olivia, trusting him with her family's secrets, while he continued to hide his true identity from her. "Olivia," he began, his heart pounding, "there's something I need to tell you." But before he could continue, a twig snapped nearby, making them both jump. Alex quickly doused the flashlight, pulling Olivia behind the tree. In the dim moonlight, they saw a figure moving through the gardens, Mrs. Hawthorne making one of her routine night checks of the grounds. Alex and Olivia held their breath, pressed close together behind the oak tree. Alex was acutely aware of Olivia's proximity, the scent of her perfume, the warmth of her body against his. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. As Mrs. Hawthorne's footsteps faded into the distance, Olivia let out a shaky laugh. "That was close," she whispered. Alex nodded, reluctantly stepping back. "We should probably head back, it's getting late." As they carefully reburied the box and made their way back to the house, Alex's mind was in turmoil. He had been on the verge of confessing his true identity to Olivia, driven by the intimacy of the moment and his growing feelings for her. But now, faced with the reality of their situation, her family's expectations, his deception, he hesitated. At the edge of the gardens, Olivia turned to him, her eyes soft in the moonlight. "Thank you, Alex, for everything. I don't know what I would do without you." Before Alex could respond, Olivia leaned in and kissed him softly on the cheek. Then, with a final smile, she disappeared into the house, leaving Alex standing alone in the moonlit garden, his cheek tingling where her lips had touched. As he made his way back to his cottage, Alex's emotions were in turmoil. He was falling for Olivia, that much was clear. But how could he pursue a relationship built on a lie? And yet, how could he reveal the truth without losing her trust forever? Little did Alex know that his carefully constructed facade was about to face its greatest test. As he drifted off to sleep that night, the winds of change were already stirring at Hawthorne Estate, threatening to uproot not just carefully tended gardens, but long-held secrets and budding romances as well. The days following the nocturnal excavation were a whirlwind of activity at Hawthorne Estate. As final preparations for the midsummer gala kicked into high gear, Alex found himself working from dawn to dusk, barely having a moment to catch his breath. Yet despite the physical exhaustion, his mind was constantly preoccupied with thoughts of Olivia and the secret they now shared. He caught glimpses of her throughout the days, supervising the caterers, directing the decorators, always the picture of grace under pressure. But there was a new tension in her shoulders, a distracted look in her eyes that only Alex understood. The weight of her family's hidden past was clearly weighing on her. It was 3 days before the gala when Alex finally got a chance to speak with Olivia alone. He was trimming the hedges near the rose garden when she approached, her steps hesitant. "Alex," she said softly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Do you have a moment?" Setting down his shears, Alex nodded, trying to ignore the way his heart raced at her proximity. "Of course. Is everything all right?" Olivia bit her lip, a gesture Alex had come to recognize as a sign of her inner turmoil. "I've been thinking about the letters we found, about my great-grandfather and Thomas. I want to tell my parents." Alex's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you sure that's wise? Your mother doesn't seem like the type to welcome such revelations." "I know," Olivia sighed, running a hand through her hair, "but I can't keep this secret. It feels like I'm betraying my great-grandfather's memory by hiding his true self." And till she paused, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I think it might help my parents understand some things about me." There was a vulnerability in her eyes that made Alex's chest ache. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you." Olivia looked down at their joined hands, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you, Alex. You've become very important to me these past few weeks." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken feelings. Alex found himself leaning in slightly, drawn by an invisible force. For a moment, it seemed as if Olivia was leaning in too, her eyes fluttering closed. "Olivia, there you are." The sharp voice of Mrs. Hawthorne cut through the moment like a knife. Alex and Olivia sprang apart, both flushing guiltily. Mrs. Hawthorne strode towards them, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. "I've been looking everywhere for you. The florist is here to discuss the centerpieces." Her gaze swiveled to Alex, cold and dismissive. "Mr. Thompson, don't you have work to do?" "Yes, ma'am," Alex muttered, picking up his shears. He caught Olivia's apologetic glance as she was led away, leaving him with a mixture of frustration and longing. The next morning, Alex was up before dawn, unable to sleep. He decided to get an early start on his tasks, hoping the physical labor would clear his head. As he made his way to the tool shed, he was surprised to see lights on in Mr. Hawthorne's study. Curiosity got the better of him, and he crept closer to the window. Inside, he could see Olivia standing before her father's desk, the box of letters clutched in her hands. Mr. Hawthorne sat behind the desk, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Though he couldn't hear the words, Alex could see the emotions playing out on their faces. Olivia's determined resolve, Mr. Hawthorne's initial anger giving way to confusion, and finally, a sort of sad understanding. As the sun began to rise, casting long shadows across the lawn, the study door opened. Olivia emerged, her eyes red-rimmed but her posture straight and proud. She caught sight of Alex and made her way over to him. "You told him," Alex said softly. Not a question, but a statement. Olivia nodded, a wan smile on her face. "I did. It wasn't easy, but I think it was the right thing to do. Dad's processing it all. He said he needs time to think about how to handle this, especially with Mom." Alex reached out, hesitated, then gently squeezed her shoulder. "You're incredibly brave, you know that." Olivia's smile grew warmer, more genuine. "I couldn't have done it without you, Alex. You've given me strength I didn't know I had." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of a sleek black car. Robert Wainwright stepped out, looking immaculate in a tailored suit despite the early hour. "Olivia, darling," he called out, striding towards them. "I thought I'd surprise you with breakfast before the final gala preparations." His eyes fell on Alex, a slight frown creasing his brow. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Olivia straightened, her face settling into a polite mask. "Not at all, Robert. That's very thoughtful of you. I'll just go freshen up." She turned to Alex. her eyes conveying a silent apology. "Thank you for your help with the gardening issue, Alex." As Olivia walked away with Robert, Alex couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. Robert represented everything he had left behind: wealth, status, the ability to sweep in and whisk Olivia away to fancy breakfasts. For a moment he was tempted to reveal his true identity, to level the playing field. But as he watched Olivia's retreating form, he remembered the trust in her eyes when she had confided in him about the letters. She had opened up to him, Alex the gardener, not Alexander Thornton, the millionaire CEO. The realization both warmed his heart and tied his stomach in knots. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Alex threw himself into his work, trying to distract himself from the turmoil of his emotions. As evening fell and the first guests began to arrive for the gala, he found himself lingering near the house, ostensibly pruning some shrubs, but really hoping for another glimpse of Olivia. His patience was rewarded when she stepped out onto the terrace, a vision in a shimmering green gown that made her eyes sparkle like emeralds. Their gazes met across the lawn, and for a moment, the bustling activity of the gala faded away. Olivia gave him a small, secret smile before being pulled back into the party by her mother. As Alex watched her disappear into the glittering crowd, he made a decision. He couldn't continue this charade any longer. After the gala, he would tell Olivia the truth about who he really was. He only hoped that the connection they had forged would be strong enough to withstand the revelation of his deception. Little did Alex know that fate had other plans. As the music and laughter from the gala drifted across the grounds, events were already in motion that would force his hand and test not just his relationship with Olivia, but the very foundations of the new life he had built at Hawthorne Estate. The truth, like the carefully tended plants in the Hawthorne Gardens, was about to break through the surface in ways that no one could have anticipated. The Midsummer Gala was in full swing, transforming Hawthorne Estate into a glittering wonderland. Strings of twinkling lights illuminated the gardens, turning the carefully manicured grounds into a fairy tale setting. The air was filled with the soft strains of a string quartet, punctuated by the gentle clinking of champagne glasses and the murmur of polite conversation. Alex, dressed in his gardener's uniform, stood at the edge of the festivities, ostensibly there to tend to any last-minute landscaping emergencies. In reality, his eyes were constantly searching the crowd for a glimpse of Olivia. He spotted her near the fountain, engaged in conversation with a group of elegantly dressed guests. Even from a distance, Alex could see the strain in her smile, the tension in her shoulders. The weight of her family's secret was clearly still weighing on her. As if sensing his gaze, Olivia glanced in his direction. Their eyes met across the crowded garden, and for a moment the world seemed to fall away. Olivia's smile softened, becoming genuine for the first time that evening. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning back to her guests. Alex's heart raced. That tiny gesture of acknowledgement, of shared understanding, meant more to him than he cared to admit. He was so lost in thought that he almost didn't notice Robert Wainwright approaching, until the man was right beside him. "You seem to be paying an awful lot of attention to the party for someone who's supposed to be tending the plants," Robert said, his tone casual but with an undercurrent of suspicion. Alex straightened, forcing his face into a neutral expression. "Just making sure everything's running smoothly, sir, Mrs." Hawthorne was very clear about her expectations for the evening. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. "Indeed. Tell me, Thompson, where did you say you worked before coming to Hawthorne Estate?" "I didn't, sir," Alex replied carefully, "but I've worked on several estates in the South, Georgia mostly." "Interesting," Robert mused. "You know, I have some business interests in Georgia. I don't suppose you'd know anything about the tech industry down there." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. Was Robert onto him? He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a commotion near the house caught their attention. Mrs. Hawthorne's voice, shrill with anger, cut through the elegant atmosphere of the gala. "What do you mean you're leaving? Olivia, get back here this instant." All eyes turned to see Olivia, her green gown shimmering in the lamplight, striding purposefully across the lawn. Her mother hurried after her, face flushed with a mixture of rage and embarrassment. Without thinking, Alex took a step forward, concern for Olivia overriding his caution. Robert shot him a suspicious look before hurrying towards the unfolding drama. Olivia came to a stop in the center of the garden, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Alex. In that moment, he saw a mixture of fear, determination, and something else, a plea for understanding, perhaps even for help. "I can't do this anymore," Olivia announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. "I won't live a lie, and I won't let this family continue to bury its truths." A collective gasp went up from the assembled guests. Mr. Hawthorne pushed his way through the crowd, his face a mask of concern. "Olivia, please, this isn't the time or place." "It's exactly the time and place, Dad," Olivia interrupted. "For generations, this family has hidden who we really are, sacrificing authenticity for the sake of appearance. Well, I'm done pretending." She took a deep breath, her eyes once again finding Alex in the crowd. "I recently discovered that my great-grandfather was in love with another man. He hid his true self his entire life, burying his love along with his letters. I won't make the same mistake." The crowd erupted into shocked whispers. Mrs. Hawthorne looked as if she might faint, while Mr. Hawthorne stood frozen, a mix of emotions playing across his face. Olivia continued, her voice growing stronger. "And I won't let others hide who they are either. Not when I know the truth." With growing horror, Alex realized what was about to happen. He tried to catch Olivia's eye, to silently plead with her to stop, but she was caught up in the moment, years of pent-up emotions finally breaking free. "Alex," she said, turning to face him fully, "I know you're not who you say you are." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Alex felt dozens of pairs of eyes turn to him, filled with curiosity and suspicion. Robert's triumphant smirk told him that his carefully constructed facade was about to come crashing down. "I've suspected for a while," Olivia continued, her voice softer now. "You're too knowledgeable, too different to be just a gardener. I didn't say anything because I thought you must have your reasons. But I can't stand by and watch you hide yourself any longer." She took a step towards him, her hand outstretched. "Please, Alex, no more secrets. Tell everyone who you really are." The silence that followed was deafening. Alex stood frozen, his mind racing. This was it. The moment of truth he had both longed for and dreaded. He looked at Olivia, saw the trust and hope in her eyes, and knew that whatever came next would change everything. Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped forward. The crowd parted before him as he made his way to stand beside Olivia. He looked out at the sea of expectant faces, the shocked Hawthorns, the triumphant Robert, the curious guests, and finally back to Olivia. "You're right," he said quietly, his voice nonetheless carrying in the hushed garden. "I'm not who I've been pretending to be. My name isn't Alex Thompson, it's Alexander Thornton." A wave of gasps and exclamations swept through the crowd. Alex saw recognition dawn on many faces. After all, his was one of the most well-known names in the business world. "I'm the CEO of Thornton Enterprises," he continued, his eyes never leaving Olivia's increasingly confused face. "I came here under a false identity because I was tired of people only seeing my wealth and status. I wanted to find a genuine connection, to be valued for who I am, not what I own." He turned to face the Hawthorns directly. "I never meant to deceive you or to overstep my bounds. I only wanted to experience life from a different perspective." The silence that followed was broken by Mrs. Hawthorne's incredulous laugh. "This is preposterous. You expect us to believe that one of the richest men in the country has been pruning our rose bushes for weeks." "It's true, Mother," Olivia said quietly, her eyes never leaving Alex's face. "I suspected he was hiding something, but I never imagined—" "Alex, why didn't you tell me?" The hurt in her voice was like a knife to Alex's heart. "I wanted to, Olivia, so many times, but the longer I waited, the harder it became. I was afraid of losing your trust, of losing you." Robert stepped forward, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "This is outrageous. He's made fools of us all. I demand that he be removed from the premises immediately." Mr. Hawthorne, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Now, let's not be hasty. If what Mr. Thornton says is true, then we have one of the most influential men in the country standing in our garden. Perhaps we should hear him out." As the crowd buzzed with excitement and speculation, Alex found himself at the center of a storm he had set in motion weeks ago. The carefully constructed world he had built at Hawthorne Estate was crumbling around him, and he knew that what happened next would determine not just his future, but Olivia's as well. In that moment, facing the consequences of his deception, Alex realized that the truth he had been seeking wasn't just about how others saw him. It was about being honest with himself, and with the woman he had grown to love. As the midsummer gala descended into chaos around them, Alex and Olivia stood in the eye of the storm, the future uncertain but the path forward finally clear. The seeds of truth had been planted, and now they would have to weather whatever grew from them. The once elegant midsummer gala had devolved into a chaotic whirlwind of whispers, exclamations, and hurried phone calls. Guests huddled in small groups, their eyes darting between Alexander Thornton and the Hawthorne family, eager for any additional morsels of drama. The string quartet, unsure whether to continue playing or pack up their instruments, settled for a series of hesitant, discordant notes that perfectly mirrored the atmosphere of uncertainty. In the eye of this social storm stood Alex and Olivia, their world narrowed to just the two of them despite the commotion surrounding them. Olivia's eyes, usually so warm and inviting, now held a maelstrom of emotions, hurt, confusion, and a flicker of something that might have been hope. "All this time," Olivia said softly, her voice barely audible above the din, "you were—" "Why, Alex? Or should I call you Mr. Thornton now?" Alex felt a pang in his chest at the formality in her tone. "Please don't. I'm still me, Olivia. The man you've known these past weeks. That's the real me, more than the CEO ever was." Before Olivia could respond, Mrs. Hawthorne swooped in, her face a mask of forced cordiality, barely concealing her anger and embarrassment. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness, "perhaps we should continue this fascinating conversation inside. Away from prying eyes and ears." Alex nodded, knowing that this was as much a command as it was a suggestion. As Mrs. Hawthorne led them towards the house, he caught sight of Robert Wainwright, whose triumphant smirk had been replaced by a calculating frown. Alex had no doubt that Robert was already considering how to turn this situation to his advantage. Inside Mr. Hawthorne's study, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mr. Hawthorne sat behind his imposing oak desk, his fingers steepled in front of him, as he regarded Alex with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Mrs. Hawthorne paced by the fireplace, her heels clicking an agitated rhythm on the hardwood floor. Olivia stood by the window, her back to the room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Well, Mr. Thornton," Mr. Hawthorne began, breaking the uncomfortable silence, "I believe you owe us an explanation." Alex took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "You're right, I do. As I said outside, I came here looking for something genuine. In my world, the world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, it's hard to know who to trust, who sees you for who you are rather than what you can offer them." He glanced at Olivia, willing her to understand. "I never meant for it to go this far. But the more time I spent here, the more I realized that this, being Alex the gardener, felt more real than anything I'd experienced in years." Mrs. Hawthorne let out a derisive snort. "Oh, please. Are we supposed to believe that one of the richest men in the country came here to play in the dirt and find himself? This is preposterous." "Is it, though?" Mr. Hawthorne said quietly, surprising everyone in the room. "Think about it, my dear. If you had the means to step away from it all, to see how the other half lives, wouldn't you be curious?" Mrs. Hawthorne opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again, looking thoughtful for the first time since the revelation. Olivia finally turned from the window, her eyes meeting Alex's. "You lied to us." "To me, how can I trust anything you've said or done?" The pain in her voice cut Alex to the core. "Olivia, He was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Without waiting for a response, Robert Wainwright strode in, his face a mask of concern. "I apologize for the interruption," he said smoothly, though his tone suggested he was anything but sorry. "But I felt it was important to be here for this discussion. After all, I've been courting Olivia for months now. I believe I have a stake in this situation." Alex felt a surge of irritation at Robert's presumption, but he kept his face neutral. This wasn't the time to let his emotions get the better of him. Mr. Hawthorne sighed, gesturing for Robert to take a seat. "Very well. Now, Mr. Thornton, please continue. What exactly are your intentions here?" Alex straightened, knowing that his next words could determine not just his future but Olivia's as well. "My intentions?" Initially, they were simply to experience life from a different perspective. But now, he turned to face Olivia directly. "Now, my intention is to ask for a chance. A chance to show you that the man you've come to know these past weeks is the real me. A chance to explore whatever it is that's been growing between us without the barriers of wealth or status. Robert scoffed. This is absurd. Olivia, surely you're not considering... That's enough, Robert, Olivia said sharply, surprising everyone in the room. She turned to Alex, her expression unreadable. You say you want a chance, but how can I be sure this isn't just another game to you? How do I know that the Alex I've come to care for is real? Alex felt a glimmer of hope at her words. He took a step towards her, his voice low and earnest. Because the man you've known, the one who listened to your dreams, who worked alongside you in the garden, who held your hand as we uncovered your family's history, that's the man I've always wanted to be. The wealth, the company, they're just trappings. You've seen the real me, Olivia. Flaws and all. A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone waited for Olivia's response. She searched Alex's face, as if trying to reconcile the gardener she'd grown close to with the billionaire CEO standing before her. Finally, she spoke. I need time. It's too much to process all at once. I think we all need some time to think about what's happened and what it means. Mr. Hawthorne nodded, standing up from behind his desk. I believe that's wise. Mr. Thornton, I think it's best if you leave the estate for now. We'll be in touch once we've had a chance to discuss this as a family. Alex nodded, understanding that this was the best he could hope for at the moment. As he turned to leave, he caught Olivia's eye one last time. I meant what I said, Olivia. Every moment with you has been real. I hope you can believe that. With that, he walked out of the study, out of the house, and off the Hawthorne estate. As he made his way down the long driveway, the sounds of the still ongoing gala fading behind him, Alex felt a mixture of dread and hope. He had finally revealed his true identity, but at what cost? As the gates of Hawthorne estate closed behind him, Alex knew that the real test was just beginning. He had sown the seeds of truth, and now he would have to wait and see what would grow from them. Would it be the end of his connection with Olivia, or the beginning of something deeper and more genuine than either of them had ever known? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Nothing at Hawthorne estate would ever be the same again. The days following the Midsummer Gala passed in a blur of uncertainty and tension at Hawthorne estate. The once meticulously manicured gardens began to show signs of neglect, mirroring the turmoil within the household. Olivia found herself wandering these overgrown paths, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was no less fraught. Mrs. Hawthorne oscillated between bouts of rage at the deception and calculated consideration of how Alexander Thornton's true identity could benefit the family. Mr. Hawthorne, on the other hand, had grown uncharacteristically quiet, often found staring pensively out of his study window. It was on one such morning, a week after the gala, that Olivia finally worked up the courage to confront her father. She found him in his usual spot, gazing out at the unkempt rose garden that Alex had so lovingly tended. "Dad?" Olivia's voice was soft, hesitant. "Mr." Hawthorne turned, offering his daughter a wan smile. "Olivia, come in, please." As Olivia settled into one of the leather armchairs, her father surprised her by perching on the edge of his desk rather than taking his usual seat behind it. It was a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes about the shift in their relationship. "You've been very quiet this past week," Olivia observed. Mr. Hawthorne nodded, his eyes distant. "I've had a lot to think about, not just about Mr. Thornton's deception, but about our family, our history, and our future." Olivia leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Your great-grandfather's letters," Mr. Hawthorne began, his voice thick with emotion. "They've made me realize how much we've sacrificed for the sake of appearances. How many truths we've buried along with those letters." He turned to face Olivia fully, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm proud of you, Olivia. Proud of your courage in bringing those letters to light, in standing up for what you believe in. It's made me question a lot of things about how we've been living our lives." Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. "Dad, let me finish," Mr. Hawthorne said gently. "I've also been thinking about Alexander Thornton. What he did was deceptive, yes, but I can't help but admire the courage it took to step away from everything he knew to try and find something genuine." Olivia's heart raced. "Are you saying you believe him?" Mr. Hawthorne sighed. I'm saying I understand him, and I think, perhaps, we've been too hasty in pushing him away. The question is, what do you want, Olivia? Meanwhile, across town in his penthouse apartment, Alexander Thornton was facing his own crisis. The business world was abuzz with rumors of his disappearance and sudden reappearance. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since the night of the gala, with calls from board members, investors, and reporters all demanding explanations. But Alex found he couldn't bring himself to care about any of it. His thoughts were consumed by Olivia, by the hurt in her eyes when she'd learned the truth. He'd tried to reach out, sending a heartfelt letter explaining everything, but he'd received no response. A knock on his door roused him from his brooding. To his surprise, he opened it to find Margaret, his assistant, standing there with a determined look on her face. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" She brushed past him into the apartment. "Somebody had to come and knock some sense into you. The company is in an uproar, the board is talking about replacing you, and you're here, what, wallowing?" Alex ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I've made a mess of everything, Margaret. The company, my life, is Olivia." Margaret's expression softened. "You really care about her, don't you?" "More than I've ever cared about anyone," Alex admitted, "but I've ruined any chance I had with her." Margaret fixed him with a stern look. "Now you listen to me, Alexander Thornton. I've worked for you for years and I've never seen you give up on anything you truly wanted. Are you really going to start now?" Her words struck a chord in Alex. She was right. He'd built his company from the ground up, facing countless obstacles along the way. Was he really going to let fear and self-pity stop him from fighting for the most important thing in his life? "Oh, you're right," he said, straightening up. "I need to fix this, but how?" Margaret smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Well, you managed to fool one of the wealthiest families in the Hamptons into thinking you were a gardener. Surely you can figure out how to win back the woman you love." As Alex began to formulate a plan, back at Hawthorne Estate, another confrontation was taking place. Robert Wainwright had arrived unannounced, his usual charm replaced by a barely concealed desperation. "Olivia, please," he pleaded, following her as she strode through the garden. "You can't seriously be considering forgiving that man. He lied to all of us." Olivia whirled to face him, her eyes flashing. "And what about you, Robert? Have you always been completely honest with me? Or have you just been telling me what you think I want to hear? What will best position you to ally your family with mine?" Robert recoiled as if slapped. That's different. I've never pretended to be someone I'm not." "No," Olivia agreed, her voice cold. "You've just never bothered to show me who you really are at all." As Robert sputtered, trying to formulate a response, Olivia's phone buzzed with an incoming text. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the message. "Olivia, I know I have no right to ask this of you, but please meet me at the old oak tree tonight at midnight. There's something I need to show you. Alex." Olivia's mind raced. Should she go? Could she trust Alex after everything that had happened? But even as doubt clouded her thoughts, she couldn't deny the flutter of anticipation in her chest. As the sun began to set over Hawthorne Estate, casting long shadows across the neglected gardens, the stage was set for a night that would change everything. Olivia found herself standing at a crossroads, caught between the weight of family expectations and the promise of a love that defied social boundaries. In his penthouse, Alex put the finishing touches on his plan, his heart pounding with equal parts fear and hope. And somewhere in between, the truth that had lain buried for generations continued to ripple outward, touching lives and changing destinies in ways no one could have predicted. As midnight approached, the old oak tree stood silent, witness to the unfolding drama, its branches reaching out like gnarled fingers into the starry night sky. The seeds of truth had been planted, and now in the soft glow of the moonlight, they were about to blossom into something beautiful and unexpected. The moon hung low and full in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the grounds of Hawthorne Estate. Olivia stood beneath the sprawling branches of the old oak tree, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, a fragrance that seemed to heighten the sense of anticipation that hung in the air. As the distant clock tower chimed midnight, Olivia heard footsteps approaching. She turned to see Alex emerging from the shadows, looking both familiar and strange. Gone was the rough workman's attire she had grown accustomed to. Instead, he wore a simple but clearly expensive suit that fit him perfectly. Yet his hair was slightly disheveled, and there was a vulnerability in his eyes that she had never seen before. "Olivia," he said softly, coming to a stop a few feet away from her. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Olivia hugged herself, suddenly feeling exposed. "I'm not sure I should have, but I needed answers, Alex. Or should I call you Alexander now?" Alex winced at the formality in her tone. "Please, just Alex. That's who I am, who I've always been with you." "Have you?" Olivia challenged, her voice tinged with hurt. "How can I be sure of anything you've said or done?" Alex took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's why I asked you to meet me here. I want to show you something, to prove to you that everything between us has been real." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. Olivia recognized it immediately. It was the journal he had always carried with him during his time as a gardener. "This," Alex said, holding out the notebook, "is my proof. Every thought, every feeling I've had since coming here. It's all in these pages. I'd like you to read it." Olivia hesitated for a moment before taking the journal. As she opened it, Alex continued speaking, his voice low and earnest. "I came here looking for something real, something genuine. What I found was more than I ever could have imagined. I found you, Olivia." Olivia's eyes scanned the pages, taking in Alex's neat handwriting. The entries started factual, detailing gardening tasks and observations about the estate. But as she read on, she saw the tone change. There were sketches of her, jotted down quotes from their conversations, and increasingly personal reflections. One entry caught her eye. "Today, Olivia laughed at one of my terrible jokes about pruning. The sound of her laughter. It's like something breaks open inside me every time I hear it. I'm in dangerous territory here. This was never supposed to be about falling in love, but I'm starting to think that's exactly what's happening." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She looked up at Alex, who was watching her with a mixture of hope and trepidation. You're in love with me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex nodded, taking a step closer. "I am. Deeply, irrevocably in love with you, Olivia. The woman who sees beauty in a freshly bloomed rose, who fights for truth even when it's difficult, who has more strength and courage than anyone I've ever known." Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes. "But how can I trust this? How do I know this isn't just another part of your game?" "Because," Alex said, gently taking her hand, "loving you was never part of the plan. It's the truest, most real thing I've ever felt. I came here to find authenticity, and I found it in you." He gestured to the world around them. "All of this, the wealth, the status, it means nothing if I can't share it with someone who sees me for who I really am. And you do, Olivia, you always have." Olivia's mind was reeling. She thought back to all the moments they had shared, working side by side in the garden, their late-night conversations, the way he had supported her when she discovered her family's secret. Had it all been real? As if reading her thoughts, Alex spoke again. "I know I hurt you by not telling you the truth sooner. I was afraid of losing the connection we had, afraid that you would see me differently if you knew who I really was. But I realize now that my fear only made things worse. I'm done hiding, Olivia. I want you to know all of me." Olivia looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception, but all she saw was sincerity, vulnerability, and love. I need some time to process all of this," she said finally. "It's a lot to take in." Alex nodded, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face before he schooled his features. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting, for as long as it takes." As they stood there, bathed in moonlight under the old oak tree, Olivia felt something shift inside her. The hurt and betrayal she had felt upon learning Alex's true identity began to give way to understanding. She thought about her own family's hidden truths, about the masks they all wore in society. "Alex," she said softly, "I can't promise anything right now, but I'm willing to try to see where this might lead." The hope that bloomed on Alex's face was breathtaking. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "That's all I ask for, Olivia. A chance to show you that what we have is real." As they stood there, hand in hand beneath the ancient oak, the first light of dawn began to tinge the eastern sky. It was a new day, full of possibilities and challenges. But for the first time since the truth had come to light, both Alex and Olivia felt a sense of hope. They had taken the first step towards healing, towards building something true and lasting. The path ahead would not be easy. There were still family expectations to navigate, societal pressures to overcome, and trust to rebuild. But in that moment, under the fading stars and the watchful gaze of the old oak tree, anything seemed possible. As they walked back towards the house, Olivia's hand still in Alex's, they both knew that this was just the beginning of their story. The seeds of love planted in deception but nurtured by truth were finally beginning to bloom. And like the carefully tended gardens of Hawthorne Estate, this love would require patience, care, and dedication to truly flourish. The challenge that lay ahead was daunting, but as they faced it together, both Alex and Olivia felt ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. The morning after her midnight rendezvous with Alex, Olivia woke to a world that seemed fundamentally altered. The sunlight streaming through her bedroom window felt brighter somehow, the air fresher. As she dressed for the day, her fingers absently traced the spine of Alex's journal, which lay on her nightstand. The weight of its revelations still hung heavy in her mind. Downstairs, the atmosphere in the Hawthorne mansion was tense. Mrs. Hawthorne sat at the breakfast table, sipping her coffee with sharp, bird-like movements, her eyes constantly darting to her husband. Mr. Hawthorne, for his part, seemed lost in thought, barely touching the elaborate spread before him. As Olivia entered the dining room, both her parents looked up, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. "Good morning," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice neutral as she took her seat. Mrs. Hawthorne set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. "Olivia, dear, your father and I have been talking about the situation with Mr. Thornton." Olivia felt her heart rate quicken. "Oh?" she managed, reaching for a piece of toast to hide the slight tremor in her hands. Mr. Hawthorne cleared his throat. "Yes, well, we've been considering our options, and while what Mr. Thornton did was certainly unorthodox, we can't deny that his presence here has had some unexpected benefits." "Benefits?" Olivia echoed, surprised by this turn in the conversation. Mrs. Hawthorne nodded, a calculating gleam in her eye. "Indeed, the connections that Alexander Thornton brings to the table could be invaluable for our family's interests, not to mention the positive press we could garner from such an association." Olivia felt a surge of disappointment. Of course, her mother would see this as an opportunity for social climbing. "Is that all you care about? Connections and press?" "Now, Olivia," Mr. Hawthorne said, his tone placating, "your mother is simply being practical. But there's more to it than that." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Mr. Thornton's actions, misguided as they may have been, have made us reconsider some things about our family, our values." Olivia looked at her father, hardly daring to hope. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Mr. Hawthorne continued, "that perhaps it's time we stopped hiding behind facades. Your great-grandfather's letters, Mr. Thornton's deception, they've shown us the cost of living lives that aren't true to who we are." Mrs. Hawthorne shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but remained silent, her expression unreadable. "So," Olivia said slowly, "what are you saying?" Mr. Hawthorne reached across the table, taking his daughter's hand. "We're saying that if you have feelings for Mr. Thornton, feelings that go beyond his status or wealth, then, well, you have our blessing to explore that." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. This was more than she had ever expected from her parents. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing her father's hand. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Collins, the housekeeper, who entered the dining room with a harried expression. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, wringing her hands, "but there's a bit of a situation outside. Mr. Wainwright is here, and he's making quite a scene." The Hawthornes exchanged alarmed glances before hurrying to the front of the house. There, on the sweeping driveway, stood Robert Wainwright. His usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, his hair mussed and his tie askew. At his feet lay a bouquet of roses, clearly thrown there in a fit of pique. "Olivia," he called out as soon as he saw her, "you can't be serious about considering that imposter over me." Olivia stepped forward, her voice firm. "Robert, this isn't the time or place for this discussion." "When is the time, then?" Robert demanded, his voice rising. "When you've already run off with him." "I'm the better choice, Olivia. I'm from your world. I understand the obligations, the expectations." "That's exactly the problem," Olivia replied, surprising herself with her calm. You're so caught up in obligations and expectations that you've never bothered to see me, the real me." Robert's face flushed with anger. "And I suppose this Thornton fellow does? He's playing you, Olivia. Once he gets what he wants, he'll drop you like yesterday's news." "That's enough!" Mr. Hawthorne's voice boomed across the driveway. He strode forward, placing himself between Robert and Olivia. "Mr. Wainwright, I think it's best if you leave now. Any further discussion about Olivia's choices will be at her discretion, not yours." Robert looked from Mr. Hawthorne to Olivia, his expression a mix of disbelief and desperation. Finally, with a last wounded look at Olivia, he turned and stormed back to his car, peeling out of the driveway in a spray of gravel. As the dust settled, Olivia felt a wave of relief wash over her. She turned to her father, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Dad." Mr. Hawthorne simply nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're your own woman, Olivia. It's time we all remembered that." As they made their way back into the house, Olivia's phone buzzed with an incoming text. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the message from Alex. "I hope this isn't too soon, but I can't stop thinking about last night. Would you like to have dinner with me tonight? Not as the gardener, not as the CEO, but just as me, just Alex." Olivia felt a smile spread across her face as she typed her reply. "I'd love to. Pick me up at 7? As she hit send, Olivia felt a sense of anticipation and hope that she hadn't experienced in years. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges and potential pitfalls. But for the first time, she felt ready to face those challenges head-on with Alex by her side. The seeds of change planted that fateful night beneath the old oak tree were beginning to sprout, promising a future that was both terrifying and exhilarating in its possibilities. As Olivia went about her day, her mind filled with thoughts of the evening to come, she couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of something truly extraordinary. Little did she know that the dinner date she was so looking forward to would bring with it revelations that would shake the very foundations of everything she thought she knew about love, family, and the true meaning of wealth. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, as Olivia stood before her full-length mirror. She smoothed down the front of her emerald green dress, a favorite that she hadn't worn in ages. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and she wore minimal makeup, allowing her natural beauty to shine through. As she fastened a delicate silver necklace around her neck, Olivia couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of changes that had swept through her life in recent weeks. The revelation of Alex's true identity, the unearthing of her family's long-buried secrets, the unexpected support from her father, it all seemed almost too much to process. A soft knock on her bedroom door interrupted her reverie. "Come in," she called out, expecting to see her mother with some last-minute advice or criticism. To her surprise, it was her father who entered the room. Mr. Hawthorne paused in the doorway, a wistful smile playing on his lips. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said softly. Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you, Dad," she managed, touched by the unusual display of affection. Mr. Hawthorne crossed the room, placing his hands on Olivia's shoulders as he met her eyes in the mirror's reflection. "I want you to know," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "that I'm proud of you. Your courage in facing the truth, both our families and Mr. Thornton's, it's made me see things differently." Olivia turned to face her father, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Dad, He held up a hand, silencing her gently. "Let me finish. I've spent so many years worrying about appearances, about living up to the Hawthorne name. But you've shown me that true strength comes from being authentic, from following your heart." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "I want you to have this," he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning pair of emerald earrings. "They belong to your great-grandmother. I think she would have wanted you to have them. To remind you that love in all its forms is worth fighting for." Olivia felt a tear slip down her cheek as she carefully took the earrings, fastening them in place. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, pulling him into a tight hug. "This means more to me than you know." As they separated, Mr. Hawthorne cleared his throat, clearly emotional. "Well," he said, his voice gruff, "you'd better head downstairs. I believe your date has arrived." Olivia's heart skipped a beat at those words. With a final glance in the mirror and a deep, steadying breath, she made her way downstairs. Alex stood in the foyer, looking both dashing and slightly nervous in a well-tailored navy suit. When he saw Olivia descending the stairs, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart flutter. "Olivia," he breathed, "you look absolutely stunning." She felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. For a gardener," she added with a teasing smile. Alex chuckled, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. "Well, I do try." "Shall we?" he asked, offering her his arm. As they stepped out into the warm summer evening, Olivia was surprised to see not the sleek sports car she had expected, but a vintage Rolls-Royce waiting in the driveway. Noticing her raised eyebrow, Alex grinned sheepishly. "I thought about bringing one of my newer cars, but, well, this one felt more us. It has character, a history, like we do." Olivia felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. As they settled into the plush leather seats, she found herself relaxing, the nervousness of the evening melting away. The drive into the city was filled with comfortable conversation, punctuated by moments of companionable silence. As they wove through the bustling streets of New York, Olivia found herself stealing glances at Alex, marveling at how different yet familiar he seemed. Finally, the car pulled up in front of a small, unassuming restaurant tucked away on a quiet side street. "I hope you don't mind," Alex said as he helped her out of the car, "but I thought we could try something a little different tonight." As they entered the restaurant, Olivia was struck by its warm, intimate atmosphere. Soft jazz played in the background, and the air was filled with the enticing aromas of home-cooked meals. "Mr. Thornton," a jovial voice called out as a portly man in a chef's apron approached them. "So good to see you again." Alex smiled, shaking the man's hand warmly. "Giuseppe, always a pleasure. This is Olivia." Giuseppe's eyes twinkled as he took Olivia's hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Ah, the famous Olivia, welcome, welcome. We have your table ready." As Giuseppe led them to a secluded corner of the restaurant, Olivia leaned in to whisper to Alex, "Famous?" Alex had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have talked about you. A lot." Their table, it turned out, was not in the main dining room but in a small private garden at the back of the restaurant. Twinkling fairy lights hung from the trees, and a single table was set for two, surrounded by fragrant herbs and flowers. "Alex, this is incredible," Olivia breathed as they took their seats. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I wanted tonight to be special. A new beginning for us, if you'll have it." As the evening progressed, filled with delicious food, wine, and conversation, Olivia found herself falling even deeper for the man sitting across from her. This was Alex, not the gardener, not the CEO, but the real Alex. Passionate, kind, with a wicked sense of humor, and a depth of feeling that took her breath away. As they lingered over dessert, Alex's expression grew serious. "Olivia, there's something I need to tell you." She felt a flicker of apprehension. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the night of the gala, about my life, my company, what really matters. And I've made a decision." Olivia listened, wide-eyed, as Alex outlined his plans. He was restructuring his company, shifting its focus towards sustainable technologies and ethical business practices. More than that, he was setting up a foundation to support education and environmental conservation. "I want to use my wealth and influence for something meaningful," he explained, his eyes shining with passion, "and I want you to be a part of it if you're willing. Not just as my girlfriend, but as a partner. Your insights, your compassion, they've changed me, Olivia. Made me want to be a better man." Olivia felt overwhelmed by the depth of emotion in his words. "Alex, I don't know what to say." He squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to say anything right now. I know it's a lot to take in. I just want you to know that I'm all in, Olivia. Whatever happens, whatever challenges we face, I want to face them with you." As they sat there, hands entwined under the starry sky, Olivia felt a sense of rightness, of coming home. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential obstacles and challenges. But looking into Alex's eyes, she knew that together they could weather any storm. Little did they know that the greatest test of their love and commitment was just around the corner, waiting to unfold in ways that neither of them could have anticipated. As the night drew to a close and they made their way back to the Hawthorne estate, both Olivia and Alex felt the stirrings of something profound, a love that had the power to transform not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. The seeds planted in deception had blossomed into a relationship built on truth, trust, and a shared vision for a better world. The journey ahead would be challenging, but as they stood on the threshold of this new chapter in their lives, both Olivia and Alex were ready to embrace whatever destiny had in store for them, hand in hand, heart to heart. The days following Olivia and Alex's romantic dinner were filled with a whirlwind of activity at Hawthorne Estate. The air buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt in years, as if the very foundations of the old mansion were shifting to accommodate the winds of change sweeping through. Olivia found herself at the center of this storm, juggling her growing relationship with Alex, her family's evolving dynamics, and her own personal growth. Each morning she woke with a sense of purpose and excitement that had long been absent from her life. One particularly sunny afternoon, Olivia sat in the garden, surrounded by the roses that Alex had so lovingly tended. She was deep in conversation with her father, discussing Alex's plans for his company and foundation. "It's ambitious," Mr. Hawthorne mused, a thoughtful expression on his face. "But if anyone can pull it off, I believe it's Alexander. He's got vision, that one." Olivia nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "He does. And he wants me to be a part of it, Dad. Not just as his girlfriend, but as a partner in the foundation." Mr. Hawthorne raised an eyebrow. "And how do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I'm excited. Terrified, but excited," Olivia admitted. "It's a chance to make a real difference, to use our resources for something meaningful." Her father reached out, patting her hand gently. "I'm proud of you, Olivia. You're charting your own course, just like I always hoped you would." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Hawthorne, her heels clicking sharply on the garden path. "Olivia, darling, there you are. We need to discuss the Carringtons' gala next week. I was thinking you could wear the blue Dior. It would be perfect for making an impression on young Mr. Carrington." Olivia and her father exchanged a glance. Some things, it seemed, were slower to change. "Actually, Mother," Olivia began carefully, "I was planning to attend the gala with Alex, and I've already chosen a dress." Mrs. Hawthorne's lips thinned into a tight line. "Olivia, really? I know you're fond of Alexander, but we must consider the bigger picture. The Carringtons are one of the most influential families in our circle." "Margaret," Mr. Hawthorne interjected, his voice firm but gentle, "I think it's time we let Olivia make her own decisions about these matters." Mrs. Hawthorne looked between her husband and daughter, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. It was clear she was struggling to adjust to this new family dynamic. I suppose you're right," she conceded finally. "But do make sure Alexander dresses appropriately. We can't have him showing up in gardening attire," she added with a sniff. Olivia bit back a laugh. "I don't think that will be a problem, Mother." As Mrs. Hawthorne retreated back to the house, Olivia felt a wave of affection for her father. He had become her unexpected ally in navigating these choppy waters of change. Later that evening, as Olivia was getting ready for a dinner with Alex, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Her heart sank as she saw Robert Wainwright's name on the screen. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Robert, what is it?" "Olivia, please, just hear me out," Robert's voice was pleading. "I've been doing some digging on Thornton. There are things you need to know about him, about his business practices." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you talking about?" "Meet me tomorrow at the country club. I'll show you everything I've found." "Please, Olivia, for old time's sake." After a moment's hesitation, Olivia agreed. As she hung up, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get complicated. The next day, Olivia arrived at the country club, her stomach in knots. Robert was waiting for her on the terrace, a thick folder on the table in front of him. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "What I'm about to show you, it's not easy to see, but you need to know the truth about Alexander Thornton." For the next hour, Robert laid out a series of documents, news clippings, and financial reports. They painted a picture of Alex's company that was far from the ethical, forward-thinking image he had presented. There were allegations of environmental violations, questionable labor practices in overseas factories, and aggressive tax avoidance schemes. "This can't be true," Olivia whispered, her mind reeling. "Alex told me he was changing the company, focusing on sustainability and ethical practices." Robert's expression was a mixture of sympathy and triumph. "People like Thornton don't change, Olivia. They just get better at hiding who they really are. As Olivia left the country club, her head spinning with doubts, she didn't notice the figure watching from a parked car across the street. Margaret, Alex's assistant, pulled out her phone and dialed quickly. "Mr. Thornton, we have a problem. I think Robert Wainwright is trying to sabotage your relationship with Olivia." Across town in his penthouse office, Alex listened to Margaret's report with growing concern. He had been prepared for challenges, but not for this direct attack on his character and his relationship with Olivia. As he hung up the phone, Alex's gaze fell on a framed photo on his desk. A candid shot of him and Olivia in the Hawthorne Gardens, both laughing, dirt smudged on their faces. It was a reminder of the genuine connection they had forged, of the person he was striving to be. With a determined set to his jaw, Alex reached for his phone again. It was time to face this challenge head-on. He would not let Robert Wainwright's machinations destroy what he and Olivia were building. As the sun began to set over the city, casting long shadows across the bustling streets, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test not just Alex and Olivia's relationship, but the very foundations of trust, redemption, and the power of love to overcome the shadows of the past. Little did any of them know that the revelations to come would shake their world to its core, forcing them to question everything they thought they knew about each other, about themselves, and about the true nature of wealth and success. The winds of change that had been gently blowing through Hawthorne Estate were about to turn into a tempest, challenging everyone in its path to either bend or break in the face of hard truths and difficult choices. The golden afternoon sun filtered through the windows of Olivia's bedroom, but she barely noticed its warmth. She sat on the edge of her bed. Robert's folder of damning evidence spread out before her, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The allegations against Alex and his company were serious. Environmental violations, questionable labor practices, aggressive tax schemes. It all seemed so at odds with the man she had come to know and love. A soft knock on her door roused her from her troubled thoughts. "Come in," she called out, hastily gathering the papers. Mrs. Collins, the housekeeper, poked her head in. "Miss Olivia, Mr. Thornton is here to see you. He's waiting in the garden." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She had been avoiding Alex's calls since her meeting with Robert, unsure of how to confront him with what she had learned. Now it seemed the moment of truth had arrived. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins. Tell him I'll be down in a moment." As she made her way through the house and out to the garden, Olivia's mind raced. How would she approach this? What if Robert was right, and Alex truly hadn't changed? She found Alex standing by the rose bushes he had once tended so carefully. He turned as she approached, and the look of concern and love in his eyes made her heart ache. "Olivia," he said softly, taking a step towards her. "I've been worried. Is everything all right?" She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Alex, we need to talk. I met with Robert yesterday." Alex's expression tightened, but he nodded for her to continue. "He showed me some things, Alex. Documents about your company, environmental violations, labor issues, tax avoidance. I need to know, is it true?" For a long moment, Alex was silent, his gaze dropping to the ground. When he looked up again, his eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Yes," he said quietly. "Much of it is true, or at least it was." Olivia felt as if the ground had dropped out from under her. "But you told me you were changing things, focusing on sustainability and ethical practices." "I am," Alex insisted, taking her hands in his. "Olivia, the man I was when I built that company, he's not who I am anymore. Meeting you, being here at Hawthorne Estate, it changed me. It made me want to be better, to do better." He gestured around them at the garden they had tended together. "Remember when we first planted these new rose bushes? How careful we had to be, how patient, to help them take root and grow. That's what I'm doing with my company now. It's a process, Olivia. It doesn't happen overnight." Olivia wanted to believe him, but doubt still gnawed at her. "Why didn't you tell me about this before? Why did I have to hear it from Robert?" Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I was ashamed, Olivia, of who I had been, of the choices I had made. I wanted you to see the man I'm trying to become, not the one I'm leaving behind." As they stood there, surrounded by the beauty they had cultivated together, Olivia felt torn. She could see the sincerity in Alex's eyes, feel it in the gentle pressure of his hands holding hers. but the weight of Robert's revelations still pressed on her. "I need time, Alex," she said finally, gently withdrawing her hands from his, "to process all of this, to figure out what it means for us." Alex nodded, his expression a mixture of understanding and fear. "I understand. But Olivia, please know that everything between us, every moment, every word, has been real. I love you, and I'm committed to being the man you deserve." As Alex turned to leave, Olivia felt a pang in her chest. She wanted to call out to him, to tell him that she loved him too, despite everything. But the words caught in her throat. She needed clarity, needed to be sure. Later that evening, as Olivia sat in her father's study recounting her conversation with Alex, she was surprised by Mr. Hawthorne's thoughtful expression. "You know, Olivia," he said, leaning back in his chair, "when I first started in business, I made choices I'm not proud of, choices that at the time I justified as necessary for success." Olivia looked at her father in surprise. He had always seemed so upright, so ethical in his dealings. Mr. Hawthorne continued, "The measure of a person isn't in never making mistakes, it's in how they choose to rectify those mistakes when they realize them. From what you've told me, it seems Alexander is genuinely trying to change, to make amends for his past actions." "But how can I be sure?" Olivia asked, her voice small. Her father smiled gently. "You can't, not entirely. That's the risk we take when we choose to love someone. But ask yourself this. In all the time you've known him, both as Alex the gardener and Alexander the CEO, has he ever given you reason to doubt his sincerity?" Olivia thought back over the months she had known Alex. She remembered his dedication to the gardens, his kindness to the staff, the way he had supported her when she discovered her family's secrets. Even when he revealed his true identity, it had been done out of a desire for honesty, not deception. As she mulled over her father's words, Olivia's phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "I know you need time, and I respect that. But if you're willing, I'd like to show you something tomorrow. Something that I hope will help you understand who I truly am and who I'm striving to be. No pressure, just an invitation. Alex." Olivia stared at the message, her heart racing. Was she ready to take this step? To open herself up to the possibility of being hurt again? As she looked up, she caught sight of her reflection in the window. The emerald earrings her father had given her glinted in the lamplight, a reminder of the courage it takes to fight for love. With a deep breath, Olivia typed her reply. "Okay, I'll meet you tomorrow." As she hit send, Olivia felt a mixture of apprehension and hope. Tomorrow would be a turning point, one way or another. She only hoped that the foundation they had built together would be strong enough to weather whatever storms lay ahead. Little did Olivia know that Alex's invitation would lead her on a journey that would not only change her perception of him, but also challenge her own beliefs about wealth, responsibility, and the true meaning of making a difference in the world. The path ahead was uncertain, but as the night settled over Hawthorne Estate, a sense of anticipation hung in the air, promising revelations that would shape the course of their future together. The morning dawned crisp and clear, a gentle breeze carrying the promise of change. Olivia stood at the gates of Hawthorne Estate, her heart a tumult of anticipation and apprehension. Alex's car pulled up, sleek and understated, a far cry from the ostentatious vehicles he once favored. As Alex stepped out, Olivia was struck by his appearance. Gone was the polished CEO in designer suits. Instead, he wore simple khakis and a button-down shirt, reminiscent of his days as the estate's gardener. His eyes, however, held the same warmth and sincerity that had first drawn her to him. "Thank you for coming," Alex said softly, opening the passenger door for her. "I know this isn't easy for you." Olivia nodded, sliding into the seat. "Where are we going?" "You'll see," Alex replied with a small smile. "I want to show you something important." As they drove through the city, leaving behind the manicured lawns of the Hamptons, Olivia noticed the scenery changing. The pristine streets gave way to more modest neighborhoods, and finally they entered an area that had clearly seen better days. Alex pulled up in front of a dilapidated community center, its paint peeling and windows boarded up. "This is our first stop," he said, leading Olivia inside. To Olivia's surprise, the interior was a hive of activity. Construction workers moved about, repairing walls and installing new fixtures. In one corner, a group of children huddled around a table, engrossed in what appeared to be a science experiment. "What is all this?" Olivia asked, taking in the scene. Alex's eyes shone with pride. "This is the first of many community centers we're renovating and staffing. It's part of my company's new initiative to invest in underprivileged neighborhoods. We're providing educational programs, job training, and resources for local entrepreneurs." As they toured the facility, Olivia met volunteers, teachers, and community members, all of whom spoke passionately about the positive changes the center was bringing to their lives. "Alex," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion, "this is incredible. But why didn't you tell me about this before?" Alex took her hand gently. "I wanted you to see it for yourself, without any preconceptions. This isn't about publicity or making myself look good. It's about making a real difference." Their next stop was a small factory on the outskirts of town. As they entered, Olivia was greeted by the hum of machinery and the sight of workers busily engaged in their tasks. "This used to be one of our most problematic overseas factories," Alex explained. "Low wages, poor working conditions, all the things Robert's documents accused us of, but we've changed that. We've brought production back to the States, implemented fair labor practices, and invested in green technology." Olivia watched as Alex greeted workers by name, asking about their families and listening intently to their concerns. This was a side of him she had glimpsed as a gardener, but never fully appreciated in his role as CEO. As the day wore on, Alex took Olivia to more sites: a sustainable housing project, a green energy initiative, a scholarship program for underprivileged students. With each stop, Olivia felt her doubts melting away, replaced by a growing admiration for the man beside her. Their final destination was a small, nondescript office building. As they entered, Olivia was surprised to see Margaret, Alex's assistant, waiting for them. "This," Alex said, gesturing around, "is the headquarters of the Thornton Foundation. It's where we coordinate all of our philanthropic efforts." Margaret stepped forward, handing Olivia a thick folder. "These are the financial records and impact reports for all of our initiatives," she explained. "Complete transparency, something Alex insisted on from the beginning." Olivia leafed through the documents, her eyes widening at the scope of the Foundation's work. "Alex, I don't know what to say." Alex took a deep breath, his expression earnest. "Olivia, I know I've made mistakes in the past. The things Robert showed you, they're part of a history I'm not proud of. But they're also the reason I'm working so hard to change things now. Meeting you, falling in love with you, it made me want to be a better man, to use my resources for good." He took her hands in his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not perfect, Olivia. I'm still learning, still growing. But everything I've shown you today, this is who I am now. This is who I want to be, with you by my side." Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes. The man standing before her was neither the ruthless CEO of Robert's accusations nor the simple gardener she had first fallen for. He was something more complex, more human, a man striving to right his wrongs and make a positive impact on the world. "Oh, Alex," she whispered, squeezing his hands. "I think I'm falling in love with you all over again." As they embraced, the setting sun casting a warm glow through the office windows, Olivia felt a sense of clarity and purpose she had never experienced before. The path ahead would not be easy. There were still challenges to face, doubts to overcome. But in that moment she knew that together she and Alex could weather any storm. Little did they know that their greatest test was yet to come. As they left the Foundation office, hand in hand and hearts full of hope, forces were already in motion that would challenge not just their love, but everything they had worked to build. The seeds of change they had planted were beginning to bloom, but with growth comes vulnerability. In the days to come, Olivia and Alex would need to draw on every ounce of strength, trust, and love they had cultivated to protect their budding future from those who sought to uproot it. As night fell over the city, casting long shadows and illuminating new possibilities, Olivia and Alex stood on the precipice of a future filled with both promise and peril. The journey of redemption was far from over, but with each step, they moved closer to the kind of love and purpose that could truly change the world. The weeks following Olivia and Alex's reconciliation were filled with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. Their relationship, tested by truth and strengthened by shared values, blossomed in ways neither had anticipated. At Hawthorne Estate, the change was palpable. The gardens, once again under Alex's care, though now as a passionate hobbyist rather than an undercover gardener, flourished with vibrant blooms and lush greenery. Olivia found herself increasingly involved in the Thornton Foundation's work, her natural empathy and sharp mind proving invaluable in developing new initiatives. The dining room at Hawthorne Estate, once reserved for stilted formal dinners, now regularly hosted lively strategy sessions with Alex, Olivia, and a rotating cast of social entrepreneurs and community leaders poring over plans and proposals late into the night. Even Mrs. Hawthorne, initially skeptical of Alex's transformation and Olivia's new path, began to soften. The society page's glowing reports of the young couple's philanthropic efforts certainly didn't hurt. It was on one such evening, as the group was discussing plans for a new urban farming project, that the first ripples of trouble appeared on their otherwise calm waters. "Alex," Margaret interrupted, her face grave as she entered the dining room. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's something you need to see." She handed Alex a tablet, open to a financial news website. As he read, his face darkened, jaw clenching in a way Olivia had come to recognize as a sign of deep concern. "What is it?" Olivia asked, moving to his side. Alex looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a mix of anger and determination. "Someone's trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Thornton Enterprises." A collective gasp went up from the room. Mr. Hawthorne, who had been quietly supportive of Alex and Olivia's endeavors, leaned forward. "Who would dare? And why now, when the company is doing so much good?" Alex's laugh was bitter. "That's exactly why. Our new direction, while beneficial for communities and the environment, isn't maximizing profits the way it used to. Some of our shareholders aren't happy. But surely the positive press, the goodwill you're generating," Olivia began, but Alex shook his head. "For some, it's not enough. They want the old Thornton Enterprises back. Ruthless, profit-driven, damn the consequences." As the reality of the situation sank in, the room buzzed with worried conversation. Olivia watched as Alex paced, his mind clearly racing to formulate a plan. "We need to move quickly," he said finally, addressing the room. "Margaret, set up an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Mr. Hawthorne, if you're willing, I could use your expertise in navigating this." Mr. Hawthorne nodded solemnly. "Of course, my boy. Whatever you need." As the impromptu war council dispersed, Olivia pulled Alex aside. "Who do you think is behind this?" she asked softly. Alex's expression was grim. "I have my suspicions. There aren't many players with the resources and motivation to attempt something like this, but I can't be certain yet." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. "You don't think—" "Robert." "It's possible," Alex admitted. "He has the connections, and he certainly has a motive. But let's not jump to conclusions. We need more information." As they prepared for bed that night, the usual warmth of their evening routine was overshadowed by the looming threat. Olivia watched as Alex checked his phone compulsively, responding to a steady stream of messages from his legal team and advisors. "Alex," she said gently, placing a hand on his arm, "come to bed. You need rest if you're going to face this head-on tomorrow." He looked at her, the strain evident in his eyes, but managed a small smile. "What would I do without you?" he murmured, pulling her close. As they lay in the darkness, Olivia's mind raced. She thought of all the good Alex had done, all the lives they were helping to change. The thought of it all being undone by corporate greed made her blood boil. "We'll fight this," she whispered fiercely. "Together. Everything we've built, everything we're working towards, it's worth protecting." Alex's arms tightened around her. "Together," he agreed, his voice filled with equal parts love and determination. The next morning dawned grey and overcast, as if the weather itself was reflecting the somberness of the situation. As Alex prepared to leave for the emergency board meeting, Olivia caught his hand. "Remember," she said, looking into his eyes, "you're not the man you used to be. You're stronger now because you're fighting for something bigger than yourself." Alex nodded, drawing strength from her words. With a quick kiss, he was gone, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him in the boardroom. Olivia spent the morning in a state of anxious anticipation. She threw herself into foundation work, trying to distract herself from the worry gnawing at her insides. It was near lunchtime when her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "It's worse than we thought. Come to the office, we need to talk." Heart pounding, Olivia rushed to get ready. As she was about to leave, she quite literally ran into Robert Wainwright in the foyer of Hawthorne Estate. "Olivia!" he exclaimed, steadying her. "Just the person I was hoping to see. We need to talk." "Not now, Robert," Olivia said curtly, trying to step around him. "I'm in a hurry." Robert's hand on her arm stopped her. "It's about Alex," he said, his voice low and urgent. "And the takeover attempt. There's something you need to know." Olivia hesitated, torn between her rush to get to Alex and her curiosity about what Robert might know. As she stood there, caught in a moment of indecision, she had no way of knowing that her choice in that moment would set in motion a chain of events that would test her love, her loyalty, and her very understanding of right and wrong. The storm that had been gathering on the horizon was about to break, and Olivia found herself at its very center, forced to navigate treacherous waters where nothing was as it seemed, and where the line between ally and enemy blurred with every passing moment. As she looked into Robert's eyes, searching for any hint of his true intentions, Olivia knew that whatever she decided next would irrevocably shape the future, not just for her and Alex, but for everyone their lives had touched through their work and love. The clock ticked, the tension mounted, and Olivia stood on the precipice of a decision that would change everything. Olivia stood frozen in the foyer of Hawthorne Estate, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Robert's eyes bore into hers, filled with an urgency that she couldn't ignore. With a deep breath, she made her choice. "You have 2 minutes, Robert. Make them count." Robert nodded, his relief palpable. "It's not what you think, Olivia. I'm not behind the takeover attempt. In fact, I'm here to warn you and Alex." Olivia's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Warn us about what?" "The person behind the takeover. It's Victoria Thornton, Alex's estranged sister." The name hit Olivia like a physical blow. In all their time together, Alex had never mentioned having a sister. She felt a momentary pang of hurt at the realization that there was still so much about Alex's past she didn't know. "I don't understand," Olivia said, her mind racing. "Why would Alex's own sister want to take over the company?" Robert's expression was grim. "It's a long, complicated story. But the short version is that Victoria believes she was cheated out of her rightful place in the company years ago. She's been plotting her revenge ever since." Olivia's phone buzzed insistently, reminding her of Alex's urgent message. I need to go. Alex is waiting for me." Robert nodded, understanding. "Of course, but Olivia, be careful. Victoria is dangerous. She won't stop at just taking the company. She wants to destroy everything Alex has built, including his relationship with you." With a final, conflicted look at Robert, Olivia hurried out the door. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions and doubts as she made her way to Alex's office. Why had he never told her about Victoria? What else didn't she know? When she arrived at Thornton Enterprises, the atmosphere was tense. Employees huddled in small groups, whispering anxiously. Margaret met her at the elevator, her usually composed demeanor visibly shaken. "Thank goodness you're here," Margaret said, ushering Olivia towards Alex's office. "He needs you." Olivia found Alex standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to the door. The set of his shoulders spoke volumes about the weight he was carrying. "Alex," she called softly. He turned, and the look in his eyes nearly broke Olivia's heart. It was a mixture of fear, anger, and, most surprisingly, shame. "Olivia," he breathed, crossing the room to embrace her. "I'm so glad you're here." As they separated, Olivia steeled herself for the conversation ahead. "Alex, what's going on? And why didn't you ever tell me you had a sister?" Alex's face fell, confirming Robert's revelation. He sank into his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "I suppose I owe you an explanation." Over the next hour, Alex unfolded a tale that seemed more suited to a Greek tragedy than a modern business dynasty. Victoria, it turned out, was his younger sister by 2 years. They had once been close, both groomed to take over the family business. But a series of events, some accidental, some orchestrated by their ruthless father, had led to a bitter falling out. "Victoria believed that I had betrayed her," Alex explained, his voice heavy with regret. "That I had manipulated things to push her out of the company. By the time I realized what our father had done, it was too late. She wouldn't listen to me." Olivia listened, her heart aching for the pain she could see etched on Alex's face. "And now she's back, trying to take everything from you?" Alex nodded grimly. Not just the company, Olivia. She wants to undo everything we've been working for. The foundation, the community projects, she sees them as a waste of resources. If she gains control, she'll dismantle it all. The gravity of the situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. Olivia's mind raced, trying to find a solution. There has to be something we can do. Can't you reach out to her, try to explain? Alex's laugh was bitter. I've tried, Olivia. For years I've tried. She won't listen. To her, I'm still the brother who betrayed her, who stole her birthright. A knock on the door interrupted them. Margaret entered, her face pale. I'm sorry to interrupt, but she's here. Alex and Olivia exchanged a look of shock. Victoria? Alex asked, already knowing the answer. Margaret nodded. She's demanding to see you. Both of you. The moment hung in the air, charged with tension and unspoken fears. Olivia reached out, taking Alex's hand in hers. Whatever happens, she said softly, we face it together. Alex squeezed her hand gratefully, drawing strength from her presence. With a deep breath, he nodded to Margaret. Send her in. The woman who strode into the office was the spitting image of Alex. Same piercing eyes, same determined set to her jaw. But where Alex's features were softened by compassion, Victoria's were hardened by years of perceived betrayal and thwarted ambition. Well, well, Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. If it isn't my dear brother and his latest distraction. Alex stiffened, but Olivia placed a calming hand on his arm. Victoria, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Why are you doing this? Victoria's laugh was cold and brittle. Why? You have the audacity to ask me why? You stole everything from me, Alex. My place in this company, my future, and now I'm here to take it all back. As the siblings faced off, the air crackling with years of unresolved anger and pain, Olivia found herself caught in the middle of a family drama she barely understood. But looking at Alex, seeing the anguish in his eyes, she knew one thing for certain. She would do whatever it took to protect the man she loved and the good they were trying to do in the world. Little did any of them know that the confrontation unfolding in that office was just the beginning. Forces were aligning, secrets were surfacing, and the true test of their love, loyalty, and principles was yet to come. As Victoria laid out her demands and threats, Olivia's mind raced, searching for a way to navigate this treacherous new landscape. The future of Thornton Enterprises, the foundation and their very relationship hung in the balance. And somewhere in the tangle of family history and corporate intrigue lay the key to resolving it all, if only they could find it before it was too late. The storm that had been gathering had finally broken, and in its fury, it threatened to sweep away everything Olivia and Alex had built together. But as they stood united, facing the tempest head-on, a glimmer of hope remained. For in the crucible of this crisis, their love would either be forged into something unbreakable or shattered beyond repair. The tension in Alex's office was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Victoria Thornton stood like an avenging angel, her eyes blazing with years of pent-up anger and resentment. Alex, usually so composed, seemed to shrink under his sister's withering gaze. Olivia found herself in the crossfire, struggling to make sense of the family drama unfolding before her. You have no right, Alex began, his voice strained. The company, the foundation. We're doing good work, Victoria. Real, meaningful change in people's lives. Victoria scoffed, her lip curling in disdain. Oh, spare me the sanctimonious act, Alex. You've always been so good at playing the hero, haven't you? But I know the truth, I know the real Alexander Thornton. Olivia stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. And who is that exactly? Because the man I know, the man I love, is someone who's dedicated his life to making amends for past mistakes. Victoria's gaze snapped to Olivia, assessing her with cold calculation. Ah yes, the girlfriend. Tell me, dear, has my brother shared all his dirty little secrets with you? Or are you just another pawn in his game of redemption? That's enough, Alex's voice boomed, a flash of the powerful CEO he once was breaking through. This is between you and me, Victoria. Leave Olivia out of it. A tense silence fell over the room. Olivia's mind raced, trying to find a way to diffuse the situation. She thought back to all she had learned about conflict resolution through her work with the foundation. Victoria, she said softly, taking a cautious step towards the woman. I can't imagine how painful this must be for you, to feel betrayed by your own family. to believe you've been robbed of your future. But please, can't we discuss this rationally? There has to be a solution that doesn't involve destroying everything Alex has built. For a moment, something flickered in Victoria's eyes, a hint of vulnerability, quickly masked by renewed determination. "You don't understand," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This isn't just about the company. This is about justice. About setting right a wrong that's festered for years." Alex moved to stand beside Olivia, presenting a united front. "Then let's talk about it, Vic," he said, using a nickname that seemed to catch Victoria off guard. "No lawyers, no corporate speak. Just us, brother and sister." Victoria hesitated, her resolve visibly wavering. It was clear that beneath her hard exterior, there was still a part of her that longed for reconciliation. "Fine," she said finally. "You have 1 hour. Convince me why I shouldn't tear down everything you've built." What followed was an intense, emotional conversation that laid bare years of misunderstandings, hurt, and regret. Alex revealed the full extent of their father's manipulations, how he had pitted the siblings against each other in a twisted game of corporate succession. "I never wanted to push you out, Vic," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "By the time I realized what father had done, you were already gone. I've spent years trying to find you, to make things right." Victoria listened, her expression a complex mix of doubt and longing. "And all this?" She gestured around the office. "The charity work, the foundation. Is this your way of assuaging your guilt?" "It started that way," Alex admitted, "but it's become so much more. Vic, the work we're doing, it's making a real difference. And I want you to be a part of it." Olivia watched the exchange with bated breath, seeing a glimmer of hope in Victoria's softening expression. But then, just as it seemed they might be reaching a breakthrough, Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face hardened once more. "A touching performance, brother," she said, her voice cold. "But I'm afraid it's too little, too late. My lawyers have just informed me that we've secured enough shares for a controlling interest in Thornton Enterprises. As of this moment, I'm in charge." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Alex staggered back, shock written across his features. Olivia felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her feet. "Victoria, please," she pleaded, "think about what you're doing. The people who depend on the foundation, the communities we're helping—" "We'll find help elsewhere," Victoria cut her off. "Thornton Enterprises is returning to what it does best, making money. All this charitable nonsense ends now." As Victoria strode out of the office, leaving devastation in her wake, Olivia turned to Alex. The look of defeat in his eyes broke her heart. "It's over," he whispered. "Everything we've worked for, everything we've built, gone." Olivia took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. "No," she said firmly. "This isn't over. We'll find a way, Alex. Together." As they stood there, clinging to each other in the wreckage of their dreams, Olivia's mind was already racing, formulating a plan. She thought of Robert's warning, of the Hawthorne family's connections, of all the lives they'd touched through their work. This wasn't just about a company anymore. It was about fighting for what was right, about standing up for the people who couldn't stand up for themselves. And Olivia was determined to find a way to win this battle, no matter the cost. Little did they know that their fight was about to take them down a path they never expected, forcing them to confront not just Victoria, but the very foundations of power and privilege they had taken for granted. As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the office, Olivia and Alex stood at the precipice of their greatest challenge yet. The game had changed, the stakes raised to unimaginable heights, but in the face of adversity, their love, tested by fire and strengthened by shared purpose, would prove to be their greatest asset. The battle for the soul of Thornton Enterprises and for the future they believed in was only just beginning. The days following Victoria's hostile takeover were a blur of frantic activity and sleepless nights. Olivia and Alex found themselves working around the clock, huddled in the guest house of Hawthorne Estate, which had become their makeshift war room. The once pristine space was now covered in whiteboards, sticky notes, and endless cups of coffee. "We need to approach this strategically," Olivia said, pacing the room as Alex pored over financial reports. "Victoria may have control of the company, but she doesn't have the support of the employees or the community partners we've built relationships with." Alex looked up, dark circles under his eyes betraying his exhaustion. "You're right, but how do we leverage that?" She has the legal right to do whatever she wants with the company now. A knock at the door interrupted their brainstorming. Mr. Hawthorne entered, carrying a tray of sandwiches. "You two need to eat," he said firmly, setting the tray down. "You can't fight this battle on empty stomachs." Olivia smiled gratefully at her father. The past few days had revealed a side of him she'd never seen before, supportive, strategic, and fiercely protective of the work she and Alex were doing. As they ate, Mr. Hawthorne settled into an armchair, his brow furrowed in thought. "Have you considered going public?" he asked suddenly. Alex and Olivia exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean, Dad?" Olivia asked. "I mean, take your story to the media. Show the world what Victoria is trying to destroy. The court of public opinion can be a powerful tool." Alex's eyes lit up for the first time in days. "That's actually brilliant. If we can rally public support, it could put pressure on Victoria to reconsider her plans." Olivia nodded enthusiastically, her mind already racing with possibilities. "We could showcase the impact of our projects, let the people we've helped tell their stories, make it clear what's at stake if Victoria dismantles everything." As they began to flesh out the plan, another unexpected ally arrived. Margaret, Alex's loyal assistant, burst into the room, her usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, slightly out of breath, "but I have news from inside Thornton Enterprises." All eyes turned to Margaret as she explained that many employees, upon learning of Victoria's plans to dismantle the philanthropic arm of the company, were considering a mass walkout. "They believe in the work you've been doing, Alex," Margaret said. "They're willing to fight for it." This news injected a fresh wave of energy into the room. Olivia could almost see the gears turning in Alex's head as he processed this information. "If we combine a media campaign with internal pressure from the employees," he mused, "we might just have a chance." As the group continued to strategize late into the night, Olivia found herself marveling at the unexpected alliances forming around them. Her father, once so focused on maintaining the family's social status, was now fully invested in their fight for social good. Margaret, who had always seemed the consummate professional, was risking her career to stand by Alex. It was well past midnight when Olivia's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the caller ID, Robert Wainwright. "Robert?" she answered cautiously, stepping out onto the patio for privacy. "What is it?" "Olivia, I have information you need to hear," Robert's voice was urgent. "It's about Victoria. I've been doing some digging, and I've uncovered something that could change everything." Olivia listened intently as Robert outlined his discoveries. Apparently, Victoria's takeover wasn't just about revenge or control of the company. There were darker forces at play, powerful people who stood to gain from dismantling Thornton Enterprises' philanthropic efforts. As she ended the call, Olivia's mind was reeling. The stakes had just gotten even higher, but so had their potential leverage. She hurried back inside to share this new information with the others. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon as they finally called it a night. As Olivia and Alex walked back to the main house, hand in hand, there was a newfound sense of hope in the air. "We can do this," Olivia said softly, squeezing Alex's hand. "Together we can fight this and win." Alex stopped, turning to face her. In the soft light of dawn, his eyes shone with a mixture of love and determination. "Olivia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I couldn't do this without you. You've given me strength I didn't know I had." As they stood there, on the cusp of the biggest fight of their lives, Olivia was struck by how far they'd come. From a gardener and a socialite, to partners in a battle for the soul of a company and the future of countless lives they'd touched. "Whatever happens," she said, reaching up to cup Alex's face, "we face it together. Victoria may have the company for now, but she doesn't have what really matters, the heart and spirit of what we've built." Their kiss, tender and filled with promise, sealed their commitment to each other and to the cause they both believed in so deeply. As they finally retired to get a few hours of sleep, both Olivia and Alex knew that the real battle was just beginning. The days ahead would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. They would face opposition, not just from Victoria, but from powerful forces that preferred the status quo to meaningful change. But armed with the truth, backed by a growing alliance of supporters, and strengthened by their love for each other, Olivia and Alex were ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did they know that their fight was about to capture the imagination of a nation, sparking a movement that would go far beyond the fate of one company. As they drifted off to sleep, exhausted but determined, the first light of a new day promised not just the dawn of a new morning, but the potential dawn of a new era, one where the power of love and the pursuit of social good could triumph over greed and old grudges. The stage was set for a battle that would redefine not just their lives, but the very notion of what it means to wield power and influence in the modern world. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Olivia and Alex's plan was set into motion. The media campaign they had devised began to gain traction, with heartfelt stories of lives changed by Thornton Enterprises' philanthropic efforts flooding social media and news outlets. Olivia found herself at the forefront of this effort, her natural charm and passionate advocacy making her the perfect spokesperson for their cause. She appeared on talk shows, gave interviews to newspapers, and even organized a series of town hall meetings in communities that had benefited from their projects. One particularly poignant moment came during a live television interview. Olivia sat across from a well-known anchor, her posture poised but her eyes blazing with conviction. "Ms. Hawthorne," the anchor began, "some would argue that a company's primary responsibility is to its shareholders, not to charitable causes. How do you respond to that?" Olivia leaned forward, her voice clear and strong. "I would say that in today's world, a company's responsibility extends far beyond its shareholders. We have a duty to the communities we operate in, to the environment we impact, and to future generations. What good is profit if it comes at the cost of our planet and our humanity?" Her words struck a chord with viewers across the nation. Social media exploded with support, Ruck Thornton for good trending for days afterward. Meanwhile, Alex was working tirelessly behind the scenes. The employee unrest that Margaret had reported was growing. With Alex's guidance, the employees organized a series of demonstrations and work slowdowns, making it clear to Victoria and the board that the company's success relied on more than just the executives at the top. Robert Wainwright, true to his word, had provided them with crucial information about the shadowy figures backing Victoria's takeover. Alex and his team of lawyers were using this information to build a case, not just against Victoria, but against the entire network of corporate interests that sought to undermine their work. As public pressure mounted and internal dissent grew, Victoria found herself increasingly isolated. The board members who had initially supported her takeover began to waver, concerned about the negative publicity and the potential long-term damage to the company's reputation. It all came to a head on a rainy Tuesday morning. Alex received an urgent call from one of his contacts on the board. "Victoria's called an emergency meeting," the voice on the other end said. "I think this might be it." Alex and Olivia rushed to Thornton Enterprises headquarters, their hearts pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. As they entered the imposing boardroom, they were met with a scene of barely contained chaos. Victoria sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of fury and frustration. The board members were engaged in heated discussions, their voices rising above each other in a cacophony of argument. As Alex and Olivia took their seats, a hush fell over the room. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she regarded her brother and the woman who had become such a thorn in her side. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "I suppose we have you two to thank for this situation." Alex leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Victoria, it's time to end this. You've seen the public response. You felt the pressure from within the company. This isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about the future of Thornton Enterprises and all the people who depend on us." One of the board members, an elderly gentleman with kind eyes, spoke up. "Miss Thornton, I'm afraid we can no longer support your current course of action. The potential damage to the company is too great." Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. "You would side with him? After everything?" "This isn't about taking sides," Olivia interjected, her voice calm but firm. "It's about doing what's right. For the company, for the employees, for all the communities we've committed to helping." As the debate raged on, it became clear that the tide had turned. One by one, the board members voiced their support for reinstating Alex as CEO and continuing the company's philanthropic initiatives. Victoria, seeing her support crumbling, made a last desperate attempt. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her eyes locked on Alex. "You have no idea what forces you're up against." Alex's response was measured, tinged with sadness rather than triumph. "You're right, I don't. But whatever comes, we'll face it together, as a company and as a family, if you'll let us." For a moment, something flickered in Victoria's eyes, a hint of the sister Alex had once known, before ambition and resentment had twisted her. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold resignation. "Fine," she said, standing abruptly. "You win, brother. But don't think this is over." As Victoria stormed out of the boardroom, leaving a wake of stunned silence, Alex and Olivia exchanged a look of disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had reclaimed Thornton Enterprises. The following hours were a blur of handshakes, congratulations, and hurried meetings to begin the process of transitioning control back to Alex. Through it all, Olivia stood by his side, a steady presence amidst the chaos. It wasn't until late that night, as they stood on the balcony of Alex's penthouse overlooking the glittering city, that the reality of their victory truly sank in. "We did it," Olivia breathed, leaning into Alex's embrace. "It almost doesn't feel real." Alex tightened his arms around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We did, but you know this is just the beginning, right? There's so much work to be done." Olivia nodded, her mind already racing with plans and possibilities. "Together," she said, turning to face him. "We'll do it together." As they stood there, the future stretching out before them full of promise and challenge, both Olivia and Alex knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. They had fought for and won more than just a company. They had won the chance to truly make a difference in the world. But as the city hummed below them, neither could shake the feeling that Victoria's parting words were more than just an empty threat. The forces they had challenged, the status quo they had disrupted, there would be consequences. And somewhere out there, in the shadows of the corporate world, new challenges were already taking shape, waiting to test their love, their principles, and their vision for a better world. For now, though, they allowed themselves this moment of victory, of love, of hope for the future. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new opportunities to prove that business could be a force for good in the world. And together, hand in hand, heart to heart, Olivia and Alex were ready to face whatever came their way. The night wind carried with it the promise of change, of a new chapter not just in their lives, but in the story of what business could be in the 21st century. As they finally turned in for the night, exhausted but exhilarated, the seeds of their next great adventure were already beginning to take root. 5 years had passed since that fateful night, when Olivia and Alex stood on the balcony, celebrating their hard-won victory over Victoria's hostile takeover attempt. The intervening years had been a whirlwind of challenges, triumphs, and transformative change, not just for Thornton Enterprises, but for the business world at large. As the morning sun peeked through the curtains of their Central Park West apartment, Olivia stirred, her hand instinctively reaching for Alex. She found his side of the bed empty but still warm. Stretching, she padded out to the living room, where she found him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, lost in thought. "Good morning, handsome," she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "What's got you up so early?" Alex turned, pulling her into a proper embrace. "Just thinking about today's board meeting. Hard to believe how far we've come." Olivia smiled, understanding the weight of his words. Today marked the official launch of the Thornton Foundation's most ambitious project yet, a global initiative to combat climate change through sustainable business practices and community-led environmental programs. "We should get ready," Olivia said, though she made no move to leave Alex's arms. "The press conference is at 9, and you know how Margaret gets when we're late." Alex chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Some things never change. As they prepared for the day, Olivia's mind wandered over the journey that had brought them to this point. The months following their victory over Victoria had been challenging. True to her parting words, Victoria had not gone quietly into the night. She had launched a series of legal challenges and smear campaigns, each one testing the resolve of Alex, Olivia, and the entire Thornton Enterprises team. But with each challenge, their commitment to their vision only grew stronger. The employee-led initiatives that had begun during the takeover fight blossomed into a company-wide culture of innovation and social responsibility. Thornton Enterprises became a case study in ethical business practices, inspiring a wave of change across the corporate landscape. Olivia herself had grown into a formidable force in the world of corporate social responsibility. Her passionate advocacy and strategic thinking had earned her a seat on the board of Thornton Enterprises, as well as advisory roles in several international organizations. As for Victoria, the last they had heard, she had undergone something of a transformation herself. After her final lawsuit was dismissed, she had disappeared from the public eye, only to resurface a year later, running a small non-profit focused on corporate accountability. It seemed that in her quest to destroy her brother's legacy, she had inadvertently found her own calling. The ride to Thornton Enterprises headquarters was filled with last-minute preparations and stolen moments of affection. As they pulled up to the imposing building, now adorned with living walls and solar panels, a crowd of reporters and well-wishers had already gathered. "Ready?" Alex asked, squeezing Olivia's hand. She nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Always." As they stepped out of the car, flashbulbs erupted and questions were shouted from all directions. But Olivia and Alex moved through the chaos with practiced ease, their hands linked, presenting a united front to the world. The press conference was a resounding success. Alex outlined the foundation's plans with the quiet confidence of a man who had found his true purpose. Olivia, ever the heart of their operation, spoke passionately about the communities that would benefit from their work. As the event wound down and the crowd began to disperse, Olivia felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find her father, Mr. Hawthorne, beaming with pride. "Wonderful job, both of you," he said, pulling them into a warm embrace. "Your mother sends her love. She's sorry she couldn't be here, but you know how she feels about these media circuses." Olivia laughed, grateful for how far her relationship with her parents had come. The years had softened Mrs. Hawthorne's sharp edges, though she still maintained a healthy skepticism about the couple's more radical ideas. As they made their way back inside, Olivia caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Robert Wainwright stood at the edge of the atrium, a small smile playing on his lips. Their eyes met, and he gave her a nod of acknowledgement before disappearing into the throng of people. Later that evening, as Olivia and Alex enjoyed a quiet dinner at home, they reflected on the day's events. "Do you ever wonder?" Olivia mused, swirling her wine glass thoughtfully. "What would have happened if you hadn't decided to play gardener at Hawthorne Estate all those years ago?" Alex chuckled, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Every day, and every day I'm grateful that I did. You changed everything, Olivia. You made me want to be a better man, a better leader." Olivia felt her heart swell with love. "We changed each other," she corrected gently, "and together, we're changing the world." As they sat there, hands entwined across the dinner table, both Olivia and Alex knew that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges to face, more battles to fight in the name of social good and corporate responsibility, but they would face them as they had faced everything else, together, with love, determination, and an unwavering belief in the power of doing what's right. Outside their window, the New York City skyline glittered in the night, a testament to human ambition and ingenuity. But within the walls of their home, in the warmth of their shared love and purpose, Olivia and Alex had found something far more precious, a love that had not only transformed their own lives, but had sown the seeds of change that would continue to grow and flourish for generations to come. As they drifted off to sleep that night, wrapped in each other's arms, both Olivia and Alex knew that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. For in the garden of their love, nurtured by shared values and watered by unwavering commitment, the most beautiful blooms were yet to flower.